This is Chandler Parsons of the Dallas Mavericks. When I'm not playing basketball, I may consider listening to MOR. Probably not, though.
Are you live right now?
They're having beer and Popeye's chicken.
He's got a point, but it doesn't mean I'm going to like it anymore.
Hey, balling with Brian is like that. Everybody in Mavsland should be following him.
He's savant-like, and he has just been a thrill and a privilege to spend time with him.
So Balling with Brian writes a blog, and all of a sudden you bury Dirk.
The haters are going to hate, and the homers are going to home.
I don't trust him. His name is Ryland.
If you guys, and as much as you could, if you could talk into the microphone, because it's a little hard to hear up here, so as best you could. Is this good? Cool.
Possibly live from Fun Haven in Dallas, Texas, it's the definitive independent podcast covering the Dallas Mavericks. It's the Mavericks Outsider Report. I'm Rylan Rowe. I do sports. With me, as always, is a man at the helm, the mild-mannered reporter, editor-in-chief of MavsOutsider.com, and my personal hero. You might know him as Ballin', but his mama calls him Brian. It's Ballin' with Brian, Mr. Brian Gutierrez.
Never said that before.
My personal hero?
Yeah.
I can't believe I've waited this many years, dude.
Why?
Why not?
You need a new hero.
Yeah. Also joining us today on a season preview super special, very special episode are a couple of our homies from way back. TV voice of the Mavericks, Mark Followill, and his broadcast partner, Jeff Skin Wade of 105.3 The Fans, Ben and Skin Show. Gentlemen.
Hi, fellas.
Great to be here. You know, whenever I see Brian Ryland,
Uh-oh.
when he walks by, you know what kind of, I have this soundtrack in my head, Skin, of There Goes My Hero.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's just going through my head whenever Brian walks by.
And you see Kyle Orton singing it.
Yeah.
Does he have the
I
neck?
do.
Is the neck beard going at that point? Or
Probably, yeah.
Probably. Okay.
I think that's always in play.
Doesn't Kyle Orton have like a totally different look now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he does?
I think so.
Did he shave?
A little bit. I don't really know.
Shaving's
I'm
overrated.
I'm not an aficionado on Kyle Orton.
Shaving's
It's better when he didn't care about anything.
Yeah.
Somebody tweeted a picture.
great
Perhaps
look.
I'm wrong on what this picture was, but I felt like it was a much different looking Kyle Orton than I saw today.
What a Suave?
jerk. Yeah.
Suave?
No, just much less facial hair, like a mustache, and that was it. So
Man, this Cowboys podcast is going to rock.
Yeah, it's going to
it
be
is,
awesome.
man.
Let's talk about what Kyle Orton's doing with his hair. I think he's feathering it now, kind of teasing
Parting
it
in
out
the
a little
middle.
bit.
It's
Yeah.
fair enough.
What is this, Brian? Episode 90?
90.
We in the 90s,
Wow.
finally. Yeah.
It's legit.
Living life in the 90s.
What's
that
today?
was really big in the 90s. Nobody says that in the teens.
What, living big?
Everybody was all about it's the 90s now,
Oh.
you know?
It's the aughts?
No, we're not. We're out of the
we're in the
odds,
teens.
brother.
Teens?
Just
Yeah.
we've kind of left that behind.
I don't know what day it is.
Yeah.
So
I would hope that you knew that we left 2009 behind a few years ago. I mean,
it's tough.
I get that you don't understand.
I've lived so
feel
many
you on that.
lifetimes.
It's
since
God,
Brian
2009.
missed a championship run. How
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah,
Man, it was amazing.
Sucks to be him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the best year of my life.
This is the season preview episode of Mavericks Outsider Report. We're here at Casa de Grubes. Let's give a shout out to Grubes.
Yeah.
Hi, Shoopy. Great job.
He's running the board
Is
tonight.
Skins mic on tonight?
Yes.
Thumbs up.
Yeah,
That
we're-
was very strategic last
Yeah.
time. Skin's better coming in about 30 minutes
Yeah,
in.
we like
We're
to let
gonna-
him warm up a
Don't
little
tell
bit.
him.
Followill threw an extra 20 to Groups to make sure that the mic wasn't working
Well, got to where I can, man.
to get his shine on. We got a lot to talk about to preview the season, but everyone seems to want to talk about Chubbygate.
I was calling it Beefgate.
Cuban calls it Chubbygate.
Chubbygate's kind of disgusting in a lot of ways.
It
Yeah,
is.
that makes me a little uncomfortable.
It is. It all started on Friday. I'm terrible. Last week. Started last week with Rick Carlisle talking about how after a 4 of 12 shooting performance, 1 of 6 or 0 of 6 from 3, Chandler Parsons looked kind of heavy. And I don't know, should we play a little bit of this, Rylan?
Can I just
You got
jump
the
in?
audio
and say
for
that
it?
maybe
Yeah.
remember
It
that
was before that. Is that
that
what you're thinking?
Tuesday after the first
Yeah.
practice of training camp, there was a point where somebody said something about Parsons looking to be a little bit bulked up. And I believe that Carlisle said something along the lines of one man's bulked up as another man's out of shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or not in shape, something
Yeah.
like that. I think,
And I took that as, on its surface at the time, as kind of just him kind of getting a dig at him. It's early in camp, and Pretty Boy needs to get his wind, that kind of a thing.
Right.
But then that got coupled with what gave you heartburn skin, and we talked about it when we had a podcast, a week or two ago.
It was with Brendan, your friend.
Right after this with
Brendan
this
does
guy
fine
you know.
work.
Yeah.
Still
So,
interning
good
it
kid.
hard.
Yeah, great intern. You should probably try to get him on full time.
I'd get him
what I can do.
I'd get him a job as a lead intern.
All right.
It was the whole deal about, Parsons said something about wanting to defend more fours, and I was like, huh? And then we said, well, wouldn't you want your lower body to be stronger?
Right.
Why? The guns are for the ladies and all this kind of thing. So I honestly just thought, oh, Rick's just giving him, he's just being Rick. But then this other thing happened, and it kind of got a life of its own.
And then, Groobs, go ahead and hit me with cut 2, which is the second more direct shot that Carlisle gave.
He's gotten stronger, but he's been playing at 215 for his first 3 years. And, an increase of 18 to 20 pounds is just too much. And I've talked, we talked about it today. We talk about it a lot. And so, he'll get there. He'll get there. But, he looked tired out there and a little heavy-legged, and the extra 7 or 8 pounds aren't helping. And I'm not, I don't mean to call him out in public or ridicule him. It's just a fact. And he's an important guy for us, and we need him to get to the, his right conditioning and weight level so he can play his best, because, we're going to need him to play a lot of minutes over the course of 82 games.
It's hard to get into the mind of Tim McMahon, but you would have to envision that his mind is running like 1,000 miles per hour when he hears Carlisle say that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's strong.
Yeah, and think about this, Followill.
Can you paraphrase for me? I didn't bring headphones. I'm sorry.
Well, basically what he's saying is, he's playing 7 to 8 pounds too heavy, and over the course of 82 games, we need him to play a lot of minutes, and, it looks like he's too heavy, and that's, dragging him down a little bit, to kind of paraphrase all that. Now, it was after Friday night's game.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, this goes way back many years to me on basketball. And 1,000 years ago, the Mavericks drafted Detlef Schrempf. And Detlef Schrempf was this very talented forward that could do a lot of things. And it's like, okay, we got this forward. Let's play him at guard. It's like, no. You don't do that. You play a guy at his natural position. And if he can do things to where you move him to other positions that can exploit something, you do that. But you don't have someone start changing who they are. Like Sean Marion was able to guard 1 through 4, but he didn't start changing his body to guard 1 through 4. He had this body and this skill set, and you exploited it where you can. And so if Chandler Parsons went through this thing this summer where he's like, all right, well, I'm going to be doing all these new things. I better change my body. You don't change your body to get away from the main thing that you're going to be doing, which for Chandler Parsons, it's going to be defending threes in the NBA. And I think, you talked about getting in the mind of Tim McMahon. I mean, most people wouldn't want to go to that horrible place. I love you, Tim. But even crazier is trying to get into the mind of Rick Carlisle, right? Mm-hmm. And what his motivations are. And so for a lot of us that, closely follow the team, my brain's like, all right, so who is Rick talking to? What's he saying? Is this, what is this message about? What is he delivering? And when it's a public thing with Rick, it's very fascinating to me because the only guy, and Mark, you've got a better memory than me, that I ever remember Rick Carlisle, quote-unquote, calling out in public was O.J. Mayo in game number 81 or whatever that was.
That Memphis game.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, we haven't even seen game 1 yet, and Rick is sending this public message. And
because we all know that he knows precisely what he's doing.
Right.
Very calculated guy.
Right.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
And so didn't your mind kind of go crazy, like, all right, what's going on here, and what's the message? And
I would add that I think that there have clearly been some times in the past where he said things about Dallenberg being in shape or Lamar Odom being in shape.
Oh, right.
So I don't know that I would necessarily restrict it just to O.J. Mayo, but that was the most serious example of a call-out. But then recall the New Orleans game in March of 2011 when they didn't have an offensive rebound in the entire second half. And somebody asked Rick for his take about it. He goes, soft.
Right.
Called him soft. And then that caused a big uproar and he just his response to it the next day was that if you are in it to win it at the highest levels, which we are, and which ultimately they did that year, of course, by the way, then you can't accept mediocrity at any level in anything that you do. You always have to be striving to be the best that you possibly can. So when he says those type of things, yeah, I mean, there is usually something behind it, and it's usually, pushing, motivation-driven, that sort of thing along the lines of, we're in it to win it at the highest levels, and we're demanding excellence out of everyone.
Did you guys see Chandler Parsons? I'm sure you did. Reaction last night where he says, "I don't need that type of motivation."
Right.
And Rick and Chandler are new to each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there is kind of this give and take right now of guys trying to figure one another out. I realize, to me it's extra fascinating. I know I heard Cuban downplaying it and all that, but I just think it's a fascinating dynamic because there's such high expectations for this team, and Chandler Parsons got all this money, and it's a fascinating thing, I think, to start the season off.
And the other thing too is that Parsons himself has even said this, that part of the reason and part of the intrigue about signing in Dallas was being coached and being pushed and being brought to greater, hopefully, heights by a coach like Rick Carlisle, who does demand the best and does demand excellence and has found a way in almost every example of a player that he's coached in his time here to bring them to a higher and better level as a player, if that higher and better level was within them as a player. I mean, I feel like that he's always been a guy who's been able to get the best in most cases out of someone. So that's part of the reason why Chandler signed here to begin with, why Parsons signed here to begin with. And you're right. I mean, I think there's an adjustment here because I'm sure that he strikes me as the guy who's really conscientious, which in sports isn't always necessarily the best thing to be, because sometimes you have to have no conscience. And I think he's aware of the big deal that he got and aware of some of the criticism, of Houston fans feeling the way that they feel about him. And he wants to come in here and do well and demonstrate that, he is worth being a guy going from making $800,000 or $900,000 a year to making $14 million a year.
Do you guys think that he had someone get in his ear about guarding fours, or do you think he made that up? Or not made that up is kind of a bad way to put it, but did that somehow come out of his reasoning?
I think it's within his group of people. And, whenever you sign a guy, the Mavericks sign him in, July 11th or whenever that was, or 8th or whenever, I don't remember the date. And he's already been doing something in regards to how he's positioning himself for a month or a month and a half. And then he goes off with Team USA.
Correct.
What would have been ideal, but you can't do it, is they lose to Portland, and he immediately hooks up with Casey Smith.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking a lot. We talked about this on the show today. I was thinking about this is like, and I want to give Rick credit for apologizing. I think he deserves credit. But I'm like, okay, did he do this on his own, or did someone get in his ear? And I think that there's a lot of people that could have gotten in his ear. I think Cuban obviously could have, even though Cuban said after the game, I didn't. I think Rick, whether he wants to or not, hears a lot from Donna Carlisle. I love her. She's one of the most entertaining, cool people around the organization because she speaks her mind. I think she's fascinating and engaging, and I love when we get to bump into her in the hall or, in the walkways down there, because I could totally see her going, "Oh, you're so wrong on this, Rick, and let me tell you why." I think that's a possibility. I think Dirk's comment after the game last night, he kind of laid things out in a way where it's like, hey, he felt like he needed to bulk up. And remember when Dirk bulked up and then came back and lost his weight because he felt like that was better for him?
Right.
I think that's a possibility. I think Rick could have done it on his own. But I also think Rick really, and Mark knows this probably better than I do, he's probably got some good stuff, but I think Rick really trusts and listens to Casey Smith more than any coach trusts and listens to their athletic trainer. They're a main guy. And I think it's very possible that Casey went up to Rick and said, "Hey, man, we're kind of being too hard on Chandler. We can fix this. Let's not." There could have been any number of reasons as to why Rick issued the apology that he did, and I think that's almost as fascinating as him being compelled to say something in the first place, because I think Rick does trust and listen to a lot of different people, and I think that's a fascinating dynamic.
I hadn't thought about the last part that Skin said, but I can vouch for the fact that if Casey feels strongly about something, he's willing to go to bat for this particular issue with Rick, and Rick is willing to listen to him on it. So I didn't think about what you said, but that makes a heck of a lot of sense, the way you just positioned that.
215.
That's
That's 10 inches taller than me, and I'm a double meat Whataburger away from 215.
Like when Parsons,
I think 225 would be all right.
When Parsons came in the league, he was probably 215, but he's he's
That's
built
what I'm
himself
saying.
up
I
a
think
little
he's
bit
bigger.
more over the past 3 years. It's not like he instantly bumped up 18 to 20 pounds over the summer.
I think the most important thing for that guy, and keep in mind, the taller you are, the harder it is to get low to the ground. And this seems like the most fundamental. What you have to tell a pro this, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard Rick talk about a defensive stance.
Yeah.
Okay, 5th grade basketball camp, getting a defensive stance, lower. That's the most basic thing, right? You're 6'10", it's obviously harder to get lower to the ground than 6'6", and so on and so forth. And so your initial slide, that burst, has got to be very quick. And I think 3 to 4 pounds absolutely matters. And so he can sit here and talk about, wow, a couple times I had to go play stretch 4 and some guy tried to back me down. And I got to put on some weight to do that. Whatever, man. I'm way more concerned to when that guy makes his first step, are you able to stay in front of him? And I think a couple pounds absolutely matters.
Yeah, if he were playing stretch 4 and any 4 that was out there that he would be guarding, if that 4 tried to back him down, that he would be guarding in that situation, most of the time I would take that.
Yeah.
Because that means that, I think that the league has a real tendency to try to sometimes exploit matchups to the detriment of their team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, for example, I mean, this is kind of jumping in the Wayback Machine a little bit, but when Earl Boykins would get out on the floor, and it's like, oh, hey, we gotta post up our point guard because 5'5" Earl Boykins is on the floor. So when all of a sudden Steve Nash is posting up, and I look at all the things that the Mavericks could have done, it's like, well, Steve Nash operating with his backing somebody down on the block, that's like not one of the most effective things that they could potentially do. So sometimes you take yourself out of your game because you get so fixated with trying to exploit a matchup. So if some stretch 4 that Parsons might happen now, if he got stuck on Zach Randolph, okay, then yes, then that would be a different story. But in most cases, if he got stuck in a situation where if he's playing 4, that means it's at an off time in the game, probably. It's not at a crunch moment when a lot of other starters would be out on the floor because he'd be sliding over there without Dirk out. And if whatever backup 4 might be out there that tries to back Chandler Parsons down all of a sudden, that to me is like something way low on the list to be concerned about that hurting you as a team.
Do you remember the first Memphis game last year, the home game for the Mavericks, where they put Monte Ellis on Tayshaun Prince?
Yeah.
And suddenly Memphis is like, well, it's time to isolate Tayshaun Prince. I'm like, badass, isolate Tayshaun Prince.
Where's this been for the last 10 years?
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Sometimes you overthink a mismatch and suddenly you're going to this guy that you don't need to be going to.
Right.
There was early wailing and gnashing of teeth in Dirk's career when he would get going and get hot, and Nelly would always be tinkering and playing, and people would get up in arms and say, feed the German, feed the German. This, back when he was 23, 24 years old.
Right.
So I mean, even the best coaches get roped into it now and then.
The next interesting part of the whole debate was Parsons going to Instagram and posting his picture that he did looking all sad and gloomy on a rainy day with his shirt off and his Calvin Kleins. And it was interesting that
I thought Buffalo jeans was his thing that he's isn't
I think
that what he's
I asked
endorsing?
him about it, and he said, I think that's on the way out. He's shifting to something else.
Oh, okay.
Man, I bet girls suddenly discovered him. They had no idea who he was
Right.
until he put that picture out there with his 8-pack or whatever that was.
But it was funny because Carlisle said, "Oh yeah, I've seen the picture. I think it's great." And then he talked about how his wife and daughter now follow him on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of those voices you were talking about. Skin is like, "Hey,
I think
don't
he's-
get on to him.
yeah.
He's handsome."
I think Skin
Don't
is
get
on
on
something there. I think there's every possibility in the world that Skin nailed it on that too.
But was there any kind of concern or doubt based off of how this could have spiraled in a hurry in the negative way without even thinking that Rick Carlisle would have apologized? Could it have spiraled just like that?
You know what I think matters, though, Mark? And I don't know that particularly, but I would say this of any player. There's like a handful of guys I wouldn't worry about. Kevin Durant, Dirk, Kobe, whatever. These guys are just, so wired. They're just machines. All they care about is sport. But I don't care who you are. Jumping from $800,000 to $15 million changes you. I don't care who you are. You've got to be this super special human to not be waking up. I mean, I think that's one of the problems with Elvis Andrews, not trying to get all Rangers here. But once he got that guaranteed money and he knew it was there, he took an off-season off. Now, I'm not saying Chandler Parsons is going to do this, but you put pressure on yourself. If you care about who you are and, the people that depend on you. I can't imagine. I don't care how come you're. Oh my God, I'm a $15 million guy. That's pressure. And so I think when you start combining things, and maybe it was Cuban who said something. I don't know, but I think it was another thing for him to have to deal with. The people in Houston saying what they're saying. I think us sitting here, all I expect him to be is good.
Yep.
I'm not worried about the money, but most people talk about the money. And so there is a set of expectations that I'm sure he's like, oh, crap.
Well, that gets to what I was saying earlier, that he strikes me as a really conscientious guy who's going to want to go out. And I think most players are like this, but he strikes me maybe as even more so. And you have an extreme case here. I mean, you don't see this happen very often where you have that prodigious of a jump in what you're getting paid, where you go from a $900,000 a year guy to a $14 or $15 million a year player. Clearly, he wants to demonstrate. He's conscientious and wants to demonstrate his worth, and that can get into your head. And it's an adjustment to a new team, a new city, new teammates. Didn't make Team USA when I think a lot of us thought he was a lock to make it, and I don't know that he, we'll never know how personally he may or may not have taken that.
Right.
But there was, that may have played a factor in some things in terms of where his head was. But it's a whole new deal for the guy, and we're very, very early on into it. And I think that I wasn't concerned about it spiraling out of control, because I know that you've got Mark there who is very invested and very concerned, and if he sensed it was going to spiral out of control, he would have stepped in. Rick's a smart enough guy. I think Parsons is here, and like I said earlier, Parsons wants to be here. Parsons wants, he wanted to play for Carlisle, and I think he's like most players. And most players want discipline and structure and coaching. They want it.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean that in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the battle, they're not going to necessarily backlash against it a little bit. But in the big picture, most players want structure and coaching and discipline, and to have someone demand something of them.
True dat, double true.
I think, and I wrote about this, is I think that Parsons is going to be in all-time Mavs history. He's going to be his first season in Dallas. He's going to be either the second or maybe third, no lower than third most polarizing player in terms of his first season, based off of.
He's certainly going to be under a microscope. I certainly think that's the case.
Based off of the points you talked about, the money he's making, the team he's coming from, the role that he wants to take in terms of taking that next step and being a leader.
The way the signing of him played out. With the signing in a club and the 72-hour waiting period and the sniping that's gone on back and forth between Morey and Cuban in the aftermath of that, and not to say that there wasn't already some before it, but in the aftermath, obviously, that's gone up a notch.
Yep, the presence of Demo Swag.
Yeah.
Yes. Everyone is very curious about. Who is Demo Swag? Is it Stevie from Eastbound and Down? Who is this guy?
But there's those factors, the fact that he dabbles in modeling when he's not playing in basketball.
Well, hold on. That's the cockiest thing anyone's ever done is dabble in modeling.
Yeah.
He dabbles in it, though.
That is really, really cocky.
He dips his toe.
What about when Chase Budinger dabbled in Magic?
Yeah.
That was just powerful. That was just powerful. And that was really appropriate
Yeah, it was.
for him.
Yeah.
And then probably the final part is who he was or wasn't dating this summer.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's a red flag for some people in that instance. So I think he's going to be one
For
of the
some
most
people around here, because
right.
of Lamar.
Well, Lamar.
By some people, do you mean everybody? Because I don't want him anywhere near a Jenner or a Kardashian or any of those people, because I feel like once you get sucked into caring about being a part of reality television, your mind is warped.
Well, he almost was.
Yeah. And that would have been a massive problem, I think.
Yeah.
And you know what the best thing he's got going for him, I think?
His abs.
Besides his abs.
Okay.
Is that Galloway doesn't have a consistent platform right now.
Yeah.
Because, my God, can you imagine Randy, pretty boy out there, only 12, sucking the Mavericks dry. I mean, that would have been like after every Mav game. And we just want him to be good. All he's got to do is be good.
And I think, and even more so than Randy not having a show day in, day out, to have something to say about it, a great steadying thing. And we've only kind of mentioned him one time about what he had to say after the game last night. But I think Dirk's presence is going to be great for the guy.
Yep.
They're locker mates now. They're BFFs now.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I think that's going to have a great influence
I
on
think
him.
watching how he carries himself, being an ear for Parsons to talk to whenever he chooses to do so and take advantage of that. Nothing bad can come of you if you choose to do so, of you allowing Dirk to be an influence on you.
Yeah, and when Mark was saying, I started thinking about this too. I don't think there is a better leadership situation in the entire NBA than to have the coach that they have, the star that they have in Dirk, and Tyson Chandler right there with him. That trio is something special. They had something special when they had Jason Kidd, Dirk, and Rick, and then Tyson there too. But Tyson and Dirk have learned so much, and the way they interact together, that is a unique thing that I think as Maverick fans we're lucky to have that. That's awesome.
Looking at it actually on the floor, I'm incredibly intrigued with what Parsons can do. It's only the preseason, but the dynamic he's already building with Tyson in the pick and roll is nasty. He looks like he's incredibly smart when he goes off the dribble and gets to the rim. He knows the right decision to make. His shot isn't there yet, but he's not too concerned about it.
I thought his shot was there in the first game.
Yeah, but it's kind of wavered a little bit since then. But defensively, we know he's still a work in progress. But the potential is definitely there in him taking a substantial step this season in Dallas.
Are you guys? And I was never wild about this idea when it was speculated. And this is all part of kind of, we feel like, at least to some degree, the genesis of the addition of extra bulk and such. But I was never really wild about the idea of him playing that much stretch four.
Yeah.
You know what I thought it was? We kind of did this right when Jason Terry left, and it's like, okay, well, Vince Carter's the new Jet, and you're going to be this thing. Look, we don't have Jet, okay? The team's going to change. We don't have Sean Marion, okay? We don't have to sub Dirk out 4 or 5 minutes into the game and move our small forward to our power forward. We don't have to do that. Rick will figure out something else. But I think there was this rush to where it's like, okay, well, now what's our substitution pattern going to be? And, well, we tried to sign Rashard Lewis and it didn't work out. Well, we got to have a stretch four. So you're the next guy. And I don't think we need that. I think what will happen is this team will have a different identity, and you don't need whatever Marion was. You figure out ways around that, and you become a new thing with a new identity, and you don't have to fill that need.
I think in terms of identity, Carlisle even mentioned on Media Day, I think it was, that this team's going to have a different personality based off of the new players in the mix, and how Chandler already has an influence in the locker. Tyson has an influence in the locker room. Parsons wants to develop as a leader. You've got different guys like Al-Farouq Amino, Jameer Nelson, Raymond Felton. There's just it's a melting pot of different guys, and it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of actual personality takes shape in the end.
I agree. And I think that, I think it's going to be different in regards to Skin's point about, okay, so we had Jason Terry here for all these years, and so we had a guy who could come off the bench and score 16, 17, 18 points a game. And then we had Vince Carter here for, embracing the Jet role. I mean, Vince was more of a starter his first year, but he was primarily, other than 3 or 4 games, I think, a guy off the bench who scored an average of 13, but obviously was clearly capable of going off for bigger numbers than that. But now this team doesn't have that player. I mean, I don't think there's a guy coming off their bench that really is poised to be a mid-teens per game scorer. I mean, Devin Harris is about the most punch you have in terms of scoring burst. A guy like Jet, a guy like Vince, who can get hot and score a lot of points, and he's going to do it in a different way than those guys did because he's not the outside shooter that Jason Terry or Vince Carter was. But I don't see Devin at this stage of his career as someone who is a mid-teens per game sort of scorer. I mean, he hasn't been that player for 3 or 4 years probably. So I think they're going to have a different identity in that they've leaned on their bench for a long time. And they're still going to lean on their bench, but it's going to be in some different ways. And it's not necessarily going to be this one guy who's going to provide a huge chunk of scoring in the way that Jason Terry or Vince Carter have when they've been. And Jerry Stackhouse, by the way, when he was a great six-man here too.
Yep.
Or Van Exel. I mean, there's a long list of really, really talented, high-scoring sixth men here. And now that guy, in my opinion, isn't here. Great bench, strength in numbers as Rick wants, but a little bit different. The guys off the bench provide some different things than they have in the past,
including defense. I think it could be a really good defensive unit coming off that.
More role-based scoring than anything.
Right.
Shooters and guys that can get to the hole, and that's about it. You don't have just one guy that could go off for 25 on a good night.
I think to segue to our next topic, I think you're wrong in the score. I'm not sure if you've watched Charlie Villanueva yet.
Oh, I have watched Charlie.
Oh, you're talking about for the
I
stretch
have
four?
watched him, yes.
It's an interesting subject in determining what's actually going to happen on the back end of the roster.
Okay.
The final 15. Because Charlie V's doing his damnedest to try to make sure that he makes his team.
Sure.
I told Ryland this before. I'm really big into preseason stats. I don't know if you know this or not.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
That's the weirdest thing anybody's ever
And
done.
he's into summer league stats too.
That's the worst thing anybody's ever done.
No, I'm amazing with summer league stats. If you look at Charlie Villanueva, he's averaging 11.7 minutes in the preseason and averaging 10.7 points.
So a point a minute.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Man, so the solution to the Mavs is play Charlie Villanueva 48 minutes a game this year.
He would lead the world in scoring.
Yeah.
He would challenge Wilt.
Pretty much.
He would, 55 points a game.
Yeah.
I also don't know if you know this, but Charlie Villanueva has a blog. I don't know if you've actually kept track of this very much.
No, I have not. I'll tell you the one thing I have kept track when we get to his point about Charlie Villanueva that I've seen when he's come into town. But go ahead.
Okay. He actually had a blog post earlier today, and one of the more intriguing notes of it was at the end where he said, "Since the immediate move, I arrived and got a good vibe in Dallas. It truly feels like home. Everyone here compliments each other on and off the court, and for the first time in a long time, I'm actually excited about playing basketball again. I think it's been well documented that the two teams that had the most interest in me were the Clippers and the Mavs. My meeting and workouts with Coach Doc and the staff were first class. That being said, there was something about Dallas that simply felt right. I can't really explain it."
See, free
awesome.
agents do choose Dallas.
Yeah. There you
sort
go.
of.
Unguaranteed contract, non-guaranteed contract free agent.
Guys who trickle in late August choose Dallas.
That was a really terrible Charlie Villanueva imitation.
Oh,
You
I
sounded
wasn't trying.
Nothing like him.
I don't really know.
Oh, okay.
I can't try.
I think if I'm Gal or Bernard or Ricky, I'm looking at him going, well, crap, man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My guaranteed contract means nothing. Because when you start getting down to, and not only the back end of the roster, but we're talking about 11 and 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guys that are going to have,
Yeah.
jerseys on and not sports coats. Do you have something that can change a game? That's like, what do I want out of my 11th or 12th guy? Unless I've got like the Maverick team of a couple years ago, and I'm like, all right, I need Ricky Leto to see if he becomes something. But when you've got championship aspirations, does the 11 guy, does the 12 guy, do they do something that if they don't play for 5 straight games, you call on them and it changes a game? And there is zero doubt that guy has something that you can lean on, okay? I got a big that can absolutely space the floor immediately. Or if the game is weird, I can get a little scoring punch out of that guy. Not only do I think, he's got a good chance to make the team, I think he's got a good chance to wear a jersey every night. Mm-hmm. And I think that I don't know, man. It's a tough decision, but to me, he's on this team.
This is not the exact comparison, but it's interesting when you were talking about having a guy in your 11th or 12th or lower than that down the food chain role who cannot play for several games and then come off the bench and play. And I think back to when Brian Cardinal was here.
Yep.
And we're talking about two, very much different players, although
Right.
Cardinal did play a little bit of stretch four.
They're both bald.
But yes. And I think that people may not understand the challenges of that role. It's very difficult to not play for long stretches and then keep yourself physically and mentally prepared and sharp enough. I had a long conversation with Cardinal one time, and he said, look, I have to approach every day like it's a game day. Mm-hmm. And if, I owe it to this team, there's expectations here, and I don't want to let these guys down. I mean, kind of the things that Rick would say about when he played and he'd be on the floor with Larry Bird and Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale. I didn't want to let those guys down.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that Cardinal would talk about. And he would just, I approach every day. I do my stretching. I get my shots up. I do my work. And then he would go 2 weeks without playing. And then he would be called upon to maybe play in an important role. And especially in his case, I mean, he played 500 minutes that regular season and then was in mothballs during the playoffs, but kept himself sharp enough and fresh enough mentally and physically that whenever he got called on in the finals to do that unique thing that he did,
and he did
he was
it.
able
Yep.
to do it.
He did it.
And that's just, I think that is extraordinarily difficult. So, I hope that Charlie V, and I think he is, I think he's been around the league long enough that he understands what he has to do to keep himself sharp. I know he has not been in a very team successful situation, So, you never know how much that takes your edge off and your desire and, all those sorts of things. But I think, you can argue it takes your edge off, or you can argue that when you've been in such a crappy situation, that when you get into a chance to be a good one, you're really going to take it seriously because you know what the other side is like. And clearly he's been in a crappy situation. People didn't like him because of his contract and wasn't healthy. And, what purpose was it for him to play in Detroit when they weren't going anywhere and he wasn't part of their future? So, he was mired in a really big mess there. And it sounds like, based on what you were reading from his blog, that he appreciates the opportunity he has here. And I mean, like a lot of people, I hope he's landed a spot here.
I know you had questions about it also in this blog. My voice, not Charlie's.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay. Yeah.
So I kept my focus in that third game. I didn't play a minute in those first 3 quarters, and on the real, I might have tuned out as if it was Detroit. I didn't tune out. I can't. I always got to stay ready.
Rick,
Wow.
if somebody send this to Rick, because we know Rick is the deacon of the
Rick
Church
is
of Be Ready.
He's ghostwriting it.
I've said that from the get-go. The Church of Be Ready. Rick runs it. He loves Be Ready. If he can ascertain out of Villanueva that that's a characteristic in him that he can trust, then you got to know he's going to be putting in his 2 cents that Villanueva ends up on the roster.
And we were talking earlier about the 90s. He said on the real.
Yeah,
Which was
there you
a
go.
nice throwback.
He did. He took it right back.
Yes. I agree with you that the likes of Gal and Bernard, they've got to be scared. I don't think Ricky needs to be scared a little bit.
Because he's young with upside.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't realize that. I want him to be scared, man.
He needs but it was funny. He was asked, Ricky was asked, do you expect that you're going to get some more seasoning in Frisco this year? And he said no.
Good for him.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting. I caught that as well. I like to hear that.
He said no.
It's probably an inaccurate statement, but nonetheless, I like to hear it.
But to me, it seems like Bernard has to be the most scared. He hasn't played a single second in the last 2 games.
And he's a big. If Villanueva is going to make the team as a big, probably a big. He's replacing a big.
Yeah, and I said this to Brian 2 weeks ago when we did our last show. I said, all Bernard is giving you right now, if he's not in a suit, is 6 fouls. Charlie can give you those same 6 fouls if you need them that bad.
Right. I think for a guy like Bernard James, it's weird when you come into the league and you're an older guy, right?
Right.
And so there's going to be this idea of, all right, is there growth there? Is somebody developing? And so, we haven't really seen it with consistent minutes on the floor, so I don't think we would know. I would think that coaching staff knows if they've seen real development in practice and is he getting better at these certain things. We wouldn't be privy to that, I don't think. So it could be that Bernard has absolutely done that. But the flip side of that is if he hasn't, he's an older guy, and so they've had him now, going on through the third year.
This will be the third year.
Yeah.
So if that hasn't happened in practice, then I would think it would be likely to go, right? Mm-hmm. Now, they would know, we wouldn't, because he just doesn't get consistent minutes. But, and actually Bernard would probably know, too. He'd have a feeling for that.
Right.
What are you going to do, Brian, if it's Gal?
I'll be fine. I'm
you
worried
gonna be
about
okay,
I'm worried
little
about
buddy?
Mark.
Yeah,
Mark
Stein will
Stein.
be crushed.
I'm worried about Stein, man.
He'll be crushed.
But Gal has actually played pretty well in the past 2 games.
And he hit the 3, not just the past 2 games. He hit the 3 against Houston to tie the game before the phantom foul called to avoid the devastating preseason overtime.
Got him. Thank goodness that didn't happen.
Thank you, referees.
I've made my cement shoes jokes and all those things, but if you look at the point guard situation on the team and what happens if you get an unfortunate injury there, I think maybe Gal does carry just a little bit more value as an insurance policy because, again, Bernard is going to give you fouls at this point, and there are other guys that can do that in a pinch, whereas right now you've got 2 point guards. The Raymond Felton situation may be something that is up and down for a number of reasons throughout the year.
Right.
So, a little bit of insurance.
Yeah, it is. It is insurance, and I've been really impressed with what I've seen out of the preseason. Obviously, he's worked on his shot and doing some things. I talked to Rick about it one day last week after practice, and he said, he was able to get away with some things mechanically in Europe because of less dynamic athletes challenging his shot. He was able to get away with some things there that he can't get away with here. So, we've worked on some things. And look, the guy, I don't think it takes a lot of watching Gal to realize that he's got a feel for the game. He's got an innate understanding and a feel for the game. Now, sometimes you can tell that his mind is telling him, to do these certain things. And sometimes it's not that his body doesn't cooperate. It's just like, to go back to Rick's point, he's not playing against some of the guys that he would be playing against in Europe, and
Yeah.
so those players are able to impact and thwart those things that he's trying to do.
I'm fairly convinced that I could work out for a weekend and get my shot off in a game over there. The interesting thing
Please
about
let
him.
that happen.
The
Yeah,
interesting-
what do we got to
need
do?
a Kickstarter.
I got $11 in my wallet. I'll give it to you
Kickstarter,
right now.
Kickstarter.
And that's how you have to play. On the back of your jersey, it says skin.
That'd be great, man. I'd be all in on that. I need some of that euro dollar. The thing about stereotyping and all that, right? Is like you made the cement shoes joke, and a lot of times he looks like he's plotting, but dude, he stays in front of people.
He
Yeah,
does.
you brought that up on the broadcast
he-
last
he-
year.
There's a
Yeah,
technique. There's some technique there.
I think part of it is, and I thought Jason Kidd put a clinic together of this during the finals run, is basketball smarts and anticipation. Knowing like these little triggers that you know where a guy's going to go and quote unquote beating him to the spot. It's the most important thing you learn in defense, beat the guy to the spot. And he does it. And, I don't know if he's got deceptive quickness so we don't see what it is, but guys don't blow by him. And, for your joke, which I think is a funny and accurate joke, he doesn't get torched.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Followill? You haven't really touched base on the final three and your concerns of who might.
It's weird to me to speculate on who might lose their job if, in fact, Villanueva makes the team.
Well, it's
But-
heavy when you talk about it like that.
Yeah. Why you got to
it's
bring
the
down the
reality
room?
of it, though.
But yeah, there is a reality of it. And I think all three of those guys probably have their reasons to be concerned, and there's an argument to make on why you would keep two of the three and be willing to cut bait with the other one if you wanted to keep Villanueva. But I
Right.
think Skin's point and Ryland's point, was certainly the best, that if you were going to go somewhat like for like in terms of how you would change the roster, I mean, you're going to substitute big for a big, and the fact that the evidence is there that he hasn't played the last couple of games. Now, there may be reasons for that we don't understand that they're evaluating things for whatever reason, but I would think that, Sarge would have to be the one that would be concerned if, in fact, the Mavs are committed to the idea of keeping Villanueva and being willing to, either find a taker for somebody who'd be eligible for a trade, which Lito or Meckel would be. However, Sarge would not be eligible to be traded, so that would mean if you were going to make a move there to eat a guaranteed contract, and, we'll see.
Yep.
It's not like, it's not as heavy as you say. They'll lose their job. They are losing their guaranteed deal, but
Yeah.
I think they'll still be, whoever it may be, is still going to stay close to the organization because based off of rules, so on and so forth, they'll probably head down to Frisco.
Perhaps.
And at that point,
Unless somebody just comes in and says, hey, I want this guy.
in that point, I would say the entire league had a chance with Bernard James last summer.
And they passed.
Yes.
Yep.
So in that instance, I still think that Frisco would be an option for them.
So is there somebody sitting out there in the league that looks at Gal or looks at Ricky Lito and says, we'll give you something for them? Is there, could there be a team out there? I mean, I suppose it's possible.
I would
and when I say something, I mean a second-round pick.
If I can't imagine there's not a team in the league that if they had a guaranteed roster spot wouldn't flip a second-round pick for Ricky Lito.
Sure, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, because there's upside there. He may never reach it. We were kind of talking this in the context of what Lance Stevenson was.
Right.
The guy was a baller. He just went on ice for a year at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
The
difference for Lance Stevenson was at least he got to play a year of college ball at Cincinnati.
Right. So there's I can't imagine there's not a team out there that wouldn't give up a second-round pick for Ricky Lito, who you've got under contract for, 2 more years?
2 more.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
It's a Chandler Parsons light deal.
Yeah, there was a whole article about the intricacy of that deal and how it contrasted with prior second-rounder style deals and how it was kind of not exactly player-friendly, but players in his position didn't feel as though they had any leverage, and so it's very club-friendly.
I think Daryl Morey changed the way people have to manage their second-round picks now because you don't want to risk them developing and then hitting restricted free agency after 2 years and you not have any mechanism to keep them there. And so then, they could be, as in the case of Omer Ashik, and then he did the same thing with Jeremy Lin, and Lin was an undrafted free agent, but you get these guys that reach free agency after their second year, and then they're eligible for that poison pill thing, and Morey swooped in and got 2 players like that. So I think a lot more teams are sensitive to the idea of, well, if I'm going to draft a second-round guy, and I think that he's got a chance to develop into something for me over the long haul, then I want to. Even if it's just, unguaranteed option years, I want to keep the guy for as long as I possibly can and not expose him to that situation where I could lose him to one team who was interested.
And then another, like the new Chandler Parsons contract, I can't remember, maybe it was the Stein article where they were talking about that's a game changer to go and get a guy. And they're talking about in conjunction with small market guys, like the example was Kawhi Leonard. But to offer a guy, that's restricted, a 3-year deal where the third year is the player's option really does make him untradeable in a lot of ways. And if you blow him out with money, that's a really tough decision for a small market team to make. Pretty interesting stuff.
Going a little bit further into the rotation, this is kind of.
I'm sorry. Can I get back to one thing? I
did
say I wanted to bring up a little interesting thing I've seen over the years about Villanueva, and stories like this don't get told often enough. But I think most people, if you have any idea of the history of Charlie's background, he suffers from alopecia areata, which is a loss of hair all over your body, and so I noticed this whenever he does a lot of work with something called the National Alopecia Areata Foundation. And he's been an ambassador and, someone – because if you're a young person, and I see this happen at games, and clearly if you're a young person, then, that can be a very, very difficult thing. If you're – when I say young, I mean teenage years or child years or something like that. And I've seen him – have you ever noticed this before when he would come in, and he's been in the East his whole career, so this sticks out to me because you only see him come in one time a year. But he'll be there before games with Milwaukee or Detroit or whatever, getting his shots up an hour before the game, and then he'll go over to the stands where everybody sits over there in that area of the stands behind the Maverick bench. And I have seen multiple occasions over the years of him. He ends up talking to some kids who are over there who are clearly alopecia sufferers. It's a role model, ambassador, everything's going to be all right, whatever it is that he's doing. I mean, I've always thought that it's pretty cool that he realizes that he's in a position to help some kids who might be struggling with the psychological impact of that.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that before, but I have seen some articles about how he does that sort of thing, and I do think that he's a guy that's perhaps misunderstood. I think because he's played on some garbage teams and because he got the big contract and then that team sucked and he's fallen off the NBA grid for a couple of years. I think he's one of those guys that's probably been tagged with, that's just a guy collecting a check or whatever. And I think to your point, he's not that guy. I do think he's a guy that cares and could be a really valuable part of a team. You just got to get in with the right culture.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to – now, granted, the big money that he had led to this somewhat, but they could have amnestied him if they had wanted to, and they chose not to do that. You're not going to be a guy – you're not going to – it takes a lot to be a player in this league. It takes a lot – there's a lot of physical and emotional demands and work that you have to put in And yeah, I mean, the paycheck is great, but there are challenges to it. And if you're not willing to at least pay some of the price and do some of the work, then the league's going to chew you up and spit you out after a few years. So any guy that's made it, this is going to be his 10th season, right? A year in Toronto, 3 in Milwaukee, and 5 in Detroit, correct? Is that right? Yeah. So this is about to be his 10th year. And if he doesn't make the Mavericks, somebody is going to bring the guy on board at some point in time. Yep. Maybe not immediately, but at some point, the opportunity is going to be there, and he'll be on somebody's team before Christmas. I would certainly think,
no doubt.
And so if you've been around this league that long, and you're willing to do what he's doing right now, and come to somebody's camp on a training camp, make good contract, obviously the guy cares.
Yep.
And I think you stole the word right out of my mouth based off of what you're saying. Is he just misunderstood? Is that basically what it comes down to? Is a set of extenuating circumstances like the contract and the teams he's been on just basically gives him a raw deal, and he just has to wait for that right situation to come up.
I mean, he was the guy along with Ben Gordon that Joe Dumars threw all the money at the 1 year they had the cap space.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he was with Milwaukee, and we all know that's basketball dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
So
Monte can tell you.
Yeah,
about
ask
that.
Monte about that. We had the article where Monte a couple weeks ago where he was saying he was thinking about wanting to quit. I mean, how jarring is that to hear from him after what we've seen him do when he's been good here and elsewhere? So it's easy to believe that narrative.
That Monte thing, because now with the way the new TV deal is structured, I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking Monte's going to stay
I hope
and
so.
play all 3 years because
he knows he can wait one
he
year.
knows he can make way more money. Now, there's also this tough thing where you have a 30-year-old two guard, and that's a very delicate
we
thing.
see what
A
Dwayne
small
Wade.
2 guard who
Right.
depends on quickness.
Right. So that's a very delicate thing as well. But if you wait for everyone's salary cap to go way up, you could probably get overpaid. But I've said this on the show before, and I firmly believe this. I love the direction this team is going. I feel like as long as Dirk is here for a couple more years, he'll play at a high level, and I feel like we will be in the mix for high-level basketball. I think when we're 7 or 8 years down the road, we will look back at the Monte Ellis signing as a real turning point in the history of this franchise and just the life that it gave us. When we got him at that money, I was like, wow, that's a really good deal. I like Monte at that money. That's a great deal. He far exceeded anything I thought he could be here. He was an exceptional NBA player. The guy sitting to my left actually voted for him for third-team All-NBA, right?
Yeah.
And when you did it, you and I had a pretty long discussion, and you were breaking down. I was like, yeah, I'm right there with you. That's not a homer vote. That's a smart, well-thought-out, smart basketball guy vote.
Granted, there were a lot of injuries last year, so guys that would normally be in the mix for All-NBA guard spots weren't.
The Kobe's and all that kind of stuff.
Russell Westbrook only played in 50 or 48 games, whatever it was last year.
And it opened up an opportunity. But the whole point is that to get that guy that changed this thing the way that he did on that contract is really the kind of thing that can be a springboard to change the direction of your franchise.
That's very serendipitous the way it happened.
Right,
late in the summer, late in free agency.
All because Devin
It was a reactionary move.
Harris.
Yeah.
Devin Harris' toe.
If Devin
Thank
Harris,
you, Devin Harris.
If Devin Harris doesn't have a hammer toe, none of this happens.
And I'm sure you guys saw the Lance Stevenson thing that came out a couple of days ago. The Mavericks had that in place, which was fascinating because, I know there was people in the organization like, oh, I don't want Lance Stevenson here. But the whole point is that would have been Monte Ellis Part 2. Whether or not he was a fit here in that regard or whatever, here's a high-level player that you got on a low-level contract because the market didn't work out for him the way that he thought. And the Mavericks have been in a position for that thing to benefit them. And the Monte Ellis thing has just been massive.
Is there any bit of significant NBA news that you just kind of got lost in the shuffle, and now that you bring it up, it's like, oh yeah, that happened. Lance Stevenson is with the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah,
that is wild.
Oh yeah, they're not the Bobcats.
And the Charlotte Hornets are the Charlotte Hornets again. Yeah,
but what you talk about is the Mavs have been really good at that over the last 3 or 4 years. OJ Mayo didn't really work out, but that was a value signing.
Yeah.
And you can see Jameer Nelson now for
Yes.
$2.7 million.
Huge.
A guy who's going to be your starting point guard. The Mavs are just really great at this kind of move.
We haven't even really talked about this, but I just keep reading and hearing so much about his leadership, which, I'm not, crazy following Orlando Magic basketball, especially the last couple years. My God, it's been unbearable. But everyone says he is a leader. Everyone says he's that kind of guy. And I think,
that goes back to his days at St. Joe's. I mean, you remember what Phil Martelli said when his coach in college, what he said when he fell all the way to 20 on draft night.
Someone made a bit, or I think he said Denver traded him, but it was like, they got a leader. They got it. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the next subject is looking a little bit further up in the rotation. It's going to be really interesting, and this is something you wanted to talk about, is how the bench operates this season compared to previous seasons, and who are going to be the most important guys coming off the bench.
That jumps out to you, Followill?
When you think of this guy's going to be the guy to help be a spark, or is the most intriguing?
Well, I'm still always intrigued by Brandon Wright because he's such a unique player, because he brings something to the table that's unique. And even though he's, I don't think he's going to be somebody that would be a mid-teen scorer off the bench, he's still just a highly efficient player who's going to score at a pretty high clip for the 20 minutes or whatever it is he's going to be on the floor. 18.6 last year, which was a career high.
Dependent on others and situations to get his points.
Devin Harris to me, I've seen a lot of things to like out of Devin Harris in the preseason. He was a real spark plug and had some sensational games against San Antonio in the playoffs last year. So that's part of the equation that I'm intrigued by. And then I really want to be intrigued by Al-Farouq Aminu because I always have been, because he has he's part of a category of players who have come through here over the years, because I think the Mavs just have a proclivity for signing players who have beaten their butts several times in the past. And Al-Farouq Amino's done that.
Right.
So those would be some guys I would be intrigued by.
I've got a guy that I think is going to make a leap this year, and it's Jay Crowder. And there were times last year where I found myself, kind of down on Jay Crowder. It's all relative. Not like he's a bad guy or anything, but just talking about roles and a leap a guy's going to make. And I don't know. Jay would have to tell you this, but I almost felt like last year he probably thought something bigger was going to happen for him than it did, and I wonder if it didn't smack him in the face a little bit. And I have heard, I'm sure you have too, unbelievable things about him, not in camp, going back to the summer, and just so much chatter. And it's interesting to me. This was right after the season last year. I was asking people in the organization certain questions, and several people said, Jay Crowder is our best team defender.
Yeah.
Which you don't really see that as a perimeter guy. Team defenders are generally anchors, right, and help defenders. But they talk about schemes and steering a guy and putting a guy where you want to put him for your help defense to come along. And what that entails is a guy knowing every single role for everybody else on the team. So it takes basketball smarts, it takes studying, and then it takes the execution aspect of it. And I kept hearing this back, Jay Crowder, unbelievable team defender. What he does really matters. And then even just getting back in the loop in the last couple of weeks, hearing so much chatter about Jay Crowder. And I think last time, there's moments where he's like, hey, I'm a three-point shooter. Watch this, and I wonder if this wasn't the moment this last year where it was like, okay, the second season didn't go the way it wanted to. This is a contract year for him. And I don't know. I just have really high expectations. I remember talking to one person about all the small guards that the Mavericks have. And one of the theories was, well, look, the days of the Mitch Richmond posting up two guards, that's over. You don't see that anymore. We think we can get by with smaller guards. And then this guy said, but we always can throw Jay at him. Like this idea that Jay can be this defensive stopper when they have a two guard that's just going ham. And so, my wheels have been turning with all these things that people are saying about Jay. And I've kind of talked to him a couple times, and I just like where it is, what his attitude is, now he's carrying himself. And I kind of have this feeling that this is this year for him where it does kind of come together and they go, wow, he's a 7th or 8th kind of guy that we depend on every single night.
That would be awesome.
Do you think the ceiling of a Bruce Bowen later in his career is ideal, or is that shortchanging him?
I think people say this all the time. I personally, and I'm stereotyping here, but he is let's face it, he's a 6'4.5", 6'5" small forward. And he's not an explosive athlete. We're talking NBA terms, right?
Yeah, right.
It's all relative.
Of course.
So he's a below the rim 6'4.5" small forward. What is that? I don't know. But there are people that think he can floor it and do more than he's done. And I don't even remember him driving the ball, to be honest with you. I feel like I never see that, at least in a half-court situation. Transition's totally different. But it's
I think we see it, not to interrupt, but I think we see it because I feel like every time we see it, that Hart points out that he could do more of that.
Yeah.
It sticks with me. So we see it every once in a while, and every time we see it, he always brings up, I think that he could do that more.
Because there's a settling aspect with him, right? Like he settles into, I'm comfortable shooting this. And so I think it's just part of like a young guy figuring things out. I really think that he thought something awesome was going to happen for him last year that didn't, and I hope that like really kind of goes, hey, buddy, you're still a second-round pick making small-time guaranteed money.
Right.
So there's a lot more for him. And I think because Vince and Sean Marion are gone, I think there's a role for him to grab. Because I think the Mavericks would probably rather Jay grab it than Richard Jefferson. No offense to Richard Jefferson, but you want the younger guy with upside to grab the role as opposed to the guy that's on the downside that's seen it all.
To your Bruce Bowen comparison, Bruce Bowen led the league in three-point shooting when he was in the heyday of his 3-and-D guy in San Antonio. He had one season where I think he shot 45.5%, something like that on three-pointers. So
it's awesome to go unguarded, isn't it?
It is. And I don't know that Jay has that kind of three-point shooting ability in his game, but he has way more ability to put the ball on the floor than Bruce Bowen ever dreamed of.
Doubt.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your comparison there.
Richard Jefferson's really surprised me in the preseason. I think, and I joked about it, that he just got lost in Utah.
Easy thing to do.
It's very
you ever
easy
been
thing.
there?
Like getting lost in
been.
Detroit.
I've been to Provo.
I have too. Yeah.
I've been to Provo. It's awesome. But it just seems like he got lost.
Did you go on a recruiting visit to BYU?
No,
on your basketball days?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
No.
Just wondering.
No. But he's really surprised me with how active and how energetic he looks. And Carlisle said that yoga, whatever he's doing, is working for him. And he just looks like he's in great shape. And we've talked about this off and on. Dude can knock the hell out of a corner
His
three.
numbers from last year are just video game three-point numbers.
Like up mid-40s from the corner.
49.
Did you say yoga or YOLO? I'm sorry.
Yoga.
Okay.
Yoga.
It
know,
did kind of sound like he said it was a sort
He's
of a
living the
cross.
YOLO.
It's in between.
He might be living
It's
YOLO.
like the new kind of yoga to appeal to the younger generation,
Is he doing Bikram
which is
yoga,
ironic because
Brian?
he's
Is
not
that
a young
what
guy.
he's doing?
Oh,
Okay.
that's a sweat box. I think to your Bruce Bowen comparison though is like, okay, if you're a defensive guy, you're a defensive guy. What's the thing that doesn't make you a liability to where they have to pull you off the floor? And Bruce Bowen settled in on, I'm going to knock this shot down every single time. And San Antonio developed that, and that's all part of it. And Richard Jefferson, when he was a net, boy, you backed off him and said, chunk it up, baby.
Right.
But as he's gotten later in his career, Jason Kidd wasn't a shooter until the later part of his career.
Right.
And he, so Jefferson has,
He was Asen kid.
he was
Yeah,
ace.
he was
No
Asen
J.
kid.
So Jefferson has developed that, and that is a reliable thing because if you are, going to be on the floor as a sort of defensive player, you've got to at least be able to do that so they can't, they got to put you somewhere.
He was his last 4 years combined for Jefferson is almost 42% from the floor, or 42% on threes. I'm sorry. So,
But he was MIA in Golden State.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I really thought.
I forgot he was still in the league at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't go and look. You guys might have gone and look. He had, I bet most of his time was DNP CDs. He had a ton of times where he never even saw the floor there.
yeah. And then he went to Utah last year, and he was the only player on the entire Jazz roster to appear in all 82 games last
How
season.
wacky is that?
Yeah. I mean, he went and in a situation that clearly wasn't conducive for a guy at that stage of his career to bring it every night. He brought it every night.
Well, what do you think of we thought that Vince Carter was the guy that was coming in trying to he was more reinventing himself, but showing that he could still stay in the league, and he obviously took that to higher expectations than
Right.
we thought. Do you think that's kind of what RJ's trying to do, is show that, hey, don't forget about me, I can still kind of do this, and Dallas is a good landing spot
I had
for
a fascinating conversation with him on Media Day because he was talking about, that he has interest in broadcasting, so he'd love to kind of pick our, our broadcasting basketball brain sometime, and that's something he's thought about for the end of his career. And to me, it's really intriguing and interesting to hear a player reference his own end of career because a lot of players don't want to talk about that.
Right.
I mean, you just, you know in the back of your mind, but you don't necessarily. I mean, who wants to talk about the end? Nobody wants to talk about that. So I asked him, why are you so willing, whereas a lot of players aren't, why are you willing to kind of talk about that? And his answer to it was just that I've this year I have a chance to be a guy who's played over 1,000 games. There are very few players. I mean, I know that there's only like 100, barely over 100 players who've done that. And, I appreciate the career that I've had. It's exceeded my expectations. I've been on some great teams and played with some great players. I mean, he's played with Jason Kidd and Vince Carter and Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili and Steph Curry. I mean, he's had some really, really good teammates in his career, and he just recognizes that he's been really fortunate, and he knows that at some point another chapter in his life is out there. So I think he's, I don't know that he's of the same mindset of where, Vince Carter's a Hall of Famer.
Right.
And Richard Jefferson's been a really nice player in this league, but he's not going to be a Hall of Famer.
Sure.
But Vince Carter came here as a Hall of Famer, and I think that there was a whole lot more reinventing and a whole lot more perhaps at stake for Vince and his legacy and, where he was and what he'd done and the unfulfilled potential that people would view Vince because he was never on very many successful teams.
Yep.
He had never even been to the conference finals. I don't think Vince.
They got to
maybe
this
with Orlando one time. I guess maybe that swim through Orlando. Maybe he had a conference finals appearance in there. But there was a lot more at stake for Vince, I think, to come in here and reinvent himself. And I think Richard, not saying that he's resting on his laurels, but he recognizes where he is, and he's just happy to have to be in a good organization that he's admired for a long period of time, and wants to contribute and be out on the floor and help the team win, but recognizes that I don't know that he looks at this as a reinvention moment.
Right,
for him.
right.
That's just my thought.
I think with Vince, he had so much and still has even today, so much natural raw talent that it goes even beyond athleticism at this point in his career, and that's what he had to prove and what he had to call upon in this last part of his career that he is still kind of going through now that he got the deal with Memphis. But with Jefferson, it's just a different story. He's obviously not as talented. I don't know if he's got that same mental advantages that that Carter had. But I was telling Brian when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, if you look at Jefferson's efficiency on the floor as a scorer, I think in short stretches, there's no way he'd play the kind of minutes here that Carter did. But I think in short stretches, he can be as productive minute for minute as Carter was in some of his better stretches if they're finding spots for him.
I think the
threes.
main difference, though, is Vince Carter was a creator, especially last year. And,
Vince Carter averaged 5 assists a game for his career.
Yeah.
Between 4 and 5 assists a game for his career.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about Vince Carter reinventing himself. Work with me here. I'm about to make a Vince Carter Shaq comparison. Because what happens is when a guy has prodigious natural abilities, you start wanting, if you're a basketball nerd, you start wanting things for this person, whether they want those things for themselves or not. And then you get let down if they're just an all-star or whatever. I mean, Shaquille O'Neal, to me, was one of the most dominant players I've ever seen, and yet when I think back to Shaq, one of the first things that pops in my mind is, man, did he underachieve?
Right, I agree with you whenever you talk about that.
And I think Vince Carter is along those lines, and part of it has to do that so many people put so much stock in what Bill Simmons has to say, but Bill Simmons made Vince Carter the target of his basketball angst, and that followed Vince Carter around. And I remember when he signed here, there was a lot of, oh, really? Vince Carter? Oh, I don't know what kind of fit he is. Dude, Vince Carter was awesome here. And, I've heard Reiner say this many times, and I think he nailed it. You don't really know about a guy until he's in your town and you see him every day.
Boy, amen to that, man.
And
amen
Vince
to that.
Carter was one of the best examples of that I've ever seen. Vince Carter left, was here for 3 seasons, then he's gone. And I'm like, man, did I love the Vince Carter years here. Wow. What a great guy. What a smart guy. What so much to offer. He was the exact opposite of all the crap Bill Simmons had written about him.
What a personable guy. He wasn't this brooding, hard to get to know, hard to talk to, aloof, kept to himself sort of player that I think, drama queen that I think people perceived in other places in his career.
Yep, totally. And I think, here I am stereotyping again, but I have this thing about the child of educators. Like oftentimes how they look at the world and, how easy they are to communicate with. And he's one of those guys, and education was important to his family. He's a smart, well-read dude that you can talk to about a lot of different stuff. There was one time where the Mavs had this thing for season ticket holders at Dave & Buster's. And we're interviewing guys at different stations and all this. And I'm interviewing Vince Carter, for about 15 minutes. It's one of the most engaging 15 minutes I've ever heard an athlete talk. And so he had to reinvent himself, but I think he also had to just change people's perceptions because everyone just bought into this. He doesn't care and he underachieved and he's not a special guy or whatever. Well, he was great here. And I think this organization gives people a platform to have people change how they feel about players.
I mean, he'll be missed. Yeah, he and Calderon will be 2 components of last year that will be missed.
Don't you hate that Memphis got him?
Yeah.
They needed
Right.
Vince Carter.
Yeah,
He's probably going to be the starter. He very well could be starting for that team.
He should start for them. My God, they started Tayshaun Prince.
It's going to be Tayshaun Prince.
If dude, they started a guy last year that was literally basketball done. And that was a nice comeback for the Grizz because I had written them off in December or whenever, and they came fighting back. But they need someone to spread the floor. I mean, bad. If you're going to have Tony Allen on the floor, you need some floor spreaders.
What are their other 3-man options?
I'd have to look it up, but to me it just screams of just Tayshaun Prince and Vince Carter. But I'd have to look it up.
Whenever he's been a player who has made by far more 3-pointers off the bench than anybody else did in the last 2 years in the NBA, to me, I mean, he nailed this role in Dallas where he was very, very successful and contributed to winning. Mm-hmm. To me, why would you want to tinker with that?
Put him in the role he's been accustomed to.
Put him in what he's been very, very successful and why you signed him.
Yep.
And look, that team is on this run of basically they are in the bottom 2 or 3 in 3-point attempts and makes for years running now. Memphis has been consistently one of the least reliant teams on the three.
What a terrible goal.
Yeah, I know. Let's
What are
be
they
last
doing?
in threes.
Yeah.
Gather around, guys. We're going to not take any threes and miss them when we take them.
And some of it has been that they've had Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph, and they've been able to their credit. And it's a good thing that they have that option to pound the ball inside and score and play from the inside out, because that's clearly a great way to play basketball. But in this day and age, you have to have three-point threats.
Totally.
You're not going to win at the highest levels if you don't have some semblance of consistent three-point shooting.
Their current depth chart right now at small forward is Tayshaun Prince, Vince Carter, and Quincy Pondexter.
Holy balls. That's a lot of minutes for Vince Carter, man.
Yeah. And what's their depth chart at 2? Tony Allen.
Courtney Lee, Tony Allen, and Jordan Adams. They're going to need Vince Carter.
Yeah, I mean, you could play Courtney Lee as your starting 2 and play Tony Allen as your starting 3.
And they're so big at 4 and 5 that they don't get killed on the glass being a smaller. Yeah, no doubt.
To me, I would still stick with Vince, and especially, I mean, he's going to turn 38 in January. So, Rick has always addressed this before: the inherent issues of starting someone when you're trying to manage their minutes.
Right.
And we saw this last year. Now, granted, he sure did look a heck of a lot better when Devin Harris and Brandon Wright got healthy, and so he had those guys to play with him on the floor. But there were times early in the season last year where he looked like he had taken a regression.
Yeah.
And there were times in the second half of the season where he would have fantastic games, and if he had to play in the second night of a back-to-back afterwards and had poured it all out on the floor the night before, second night of a back-to-back, understandably the legs wouldn't be there and the numbers and the ability to do his thing wouldn't be there. So I think he's at the stage of his career to maximize his success that I think you've got, like I said, Rick has pointed out, there are inherent issues with the lack of timeouts and getting a guy off the floor if you start him at the beginning of the first and third quarter, that he's got to be a bench player for them.
Do you guys realize how good Sean Marion's going to be in Cleveland?
Yeah,
Yes.
I know it.
Mm-hmm.
What I forget, I didn't look it up, but I was estimating that he'd probably play about 800 less minutes this year.
Right.
And then
Because he was about a 28 to 29 minute per game player for the Mavs, I think. Right?
Yeah,
29,
that sounds about right. And I bet he's playing 18 or – I mean, they're going to be in the position to where it's like, oh, the playoffs are here. Let's turn Sean Marion loose. It's going to be an awesome playoffs for him.
And think about what they can do defensively on the perimeter when he and LeBron are on the court together.
But think what they can do.
That's it's a toy to play with. It's like a video game.
But rebounding-wise, they've got Love, they've got LeBron, they've got Marion, they've got Verjao, they've got Tristan Thompson. They're going to have all the rebounds, basically, whenever they play.
That is
they are going to have all the rebounds.
It's going to be 60-2 in terms of rebounds every time.
It's really, and I hate to put so much pressure on the guy, but it's really up to Derrick Rose to make sure that they don't just walk into the NBA Finals. In the East, that's a monster team.
Is it up to Doug McDermott?
Doug McDermott is not going to take on that responsibility.
It's too soon.
Yeah. All right, so who else in the East would be? I mean, Brooklyn. Okay, so what do you think about Brooklyn with Lionel Hollins as the coach? I mean, it's still just a bunch
He's
of
already
old dudes.
chirping at Lopez already, saying he's like.
Did
I
Lopez
like Lionel Hollins, man. I think he's old school, hard ass,
crazy ass fingers?
Yeah, I mean.
Did Lopez break anything yet? You
Not
guys
yet.
know has
Not
nothing
yet.
broke yet.
Not yet.
I
But
mean,
he's
really,
already mad about him breaking something in the future.
His foot's just going to turn to powder.
How did one brother have all the broken bones and the other one is just like this wrecking ball from Sideshow Bob? I mean, it's unbelievable. But I don't. I really think that their fortunes are tied to whether or not Darren Williams is still a good basketball player.
Okay, where's Miami then? Where's Miami in the East?
I think in the East they're 5 or 4. Somewhere in there, because I think Chris Bosh is an exceptional player. I think Dwayne Wade is still a good basketball player. I think Luol Deng is.
The question is, but you don't have LeBron there to help mitigate the managing of Dwayne Wade's minutes. So
no, but I think Spoelstra's a better coach than people realize, and I think he will work. He'll work with that talent. Chris Bosh is a really underrated basketball player. It was amazing.
He got
to me.
there into the 2.5 men and got pigeonholed as 2.5 men.
Yeah. And I think, man, you guys forget he just carried that franchise around and put up monster numbers when everyone was keying on him. He's a great basketball player. He's one of the 20 best players in the NBA. And I think, they'll build around him. I think Deng and Wade will be more role players. And I think because of the conference they're in, when you have guys that have won at a high level, they know how to win.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of guys that have won a lot of games. Coaches that's done that. So I think they're a 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference because it's a weak conference.
'94 Bulls lost Jordan and got within a game of the finals.
Pete Myers, yo.
Yeah.
Mario Chalmers is still going to get yelled at on that team. It doesn't
Right.
matter.
What does their depth chart look like?
I actually was looking at point guard.
Just in general.
Chalmers, Norris Cole, Shabazz Napier.
Okay. Oh, that's
Shannon-
right. Yeah.
Oh, Shabazz.
Oh, the Shabazz Napier.
Yep.
That was crazy. Let's draft him on draft night. LeBron loves him. Oh, he's going back to sleep.
They've got Shannon Brown, Danny Granger, Josh McRobert,
I like Josh McRoberts.
He's nice.
Yeah, I
And
do
he's
too.
going to be good next to Chris Bosh.
Yeah.
I think he's an underrated
Because
player.
Bosch and who are set to absorb their minutes at center?
Anderson,
Oh, Birdman's
Birdman?
back.
Birdman,
Do you guys remember a game?
Greg
All they
Oden.
have- That's all they have
Greg
for
Oden.
bigs.
Yeah, pretty much.
Where's Joel Anthony when you need him?
Yeah. Wow.
It's rough for Miami. It's a transition for sure.
It is a transition year, but I would agree with Skin. There's still 4 or 5 in the East.
Yeah.
Yeah, and God, you know what's really funny is Paul Pierce is
A wizard.
That
He's
is
a
so
wizard.
weird.
Yeah, Washington's going to take a step.
That
As long
was a
as-
Hey, that was a second round team in the East last year too. So you're going to roll out. Now, granted, they're going to miss Bradley Beal
Yeah.
for the first month of the season, but you're going
He's
to roll
hurt.
out Wall and
Nene and
Paul
Gortat.
Pierce, Nene, Gortat. That's a nice core too, but it's just Washington, so it's hard to kind of wrap your head around that.
Yep.
Shifting gears to another subject Skin wanted to talk about is what excites you and concerns you most about the Mavericks team this year. What excites you and what concerns you?
The thing that concerns me is still, are they going to be good enough defensively, game in, game out? And of course, Tyson Chandler is going to help immensely with things, but there are still other positions. He can't guard every position on the floor. How are they going to work this thing out with their bench? I mean, we've kind of touched on this earlier, and it is, I don't know if concern is the right word. I'm just really intrigued, curious, and sort of, in this guessing game of how Rick loves strength in numbers, and he has strength in numbers, but it's different than anything that I can recall seeing around here for a while because, they just don't have this significant score coming off their bench. I mean, this has been the way of the Mavs with Rick and long before Rick, with Jerry Stackhouse or Nick Van Exel, or, for 1 year they rolled Antoine Jameson in here, and Antoine Jameson won Sixth Man of the Year.
Right.
As this guy coming off the bench. It's just this organization has it's an organizational philosophy instilled by Nelly, because Nelly was a big believer in the sixth man because he played for the inventor of the concept of the sixth man, Red Auerbach.
Yep.
So maybe that was just instilled in everybody's mind around here, but for years and years and years, this thing has played with a really significant sixth man who has the ability to come off the bench and play and finish games and be a reliable scoring option, who can take big shots, who isn't afraid to take big shots, who will hit them, who can carry the offense or at least a lot of the load on offense for significant stretches. And I look up and down the projected bench and I don't see that player. And so how's that gonna play out?
I absolutely am, and this may work itself out, but going into the season, I'm absolutely concerned about front court depth. Like the type of front court depth they have. He may be the guy. He may be great. May work out, but I don't. I mean, if you're telling me, hey, don't worry, Greg Smith is there, I'm like, hey, whoa, hold on. What do we really know about his situation? I realize he got hurt last year, but I'm worried about that because I think, Brandon Wright defensively is effective against certain types of bigs. I mean, right now as it stands, if Tyson Chandler, gets in foul trouble, and, the other team's got some bruisers, it's up to Greg Smith, and he may be that guy, but I just don't know.
Against the Memphis team.
Yep, exactly. That's a great example. So I do worry about that. One thing that I'm, and you guys may think I'm Maverick drunk. I'd love to hear Followill's opinion of this. I think this is shaping up, or could shape up, to be the greatest all-around offensive team the Mavericks have ever had. And, when I say all-around, I'm talking about, like you said, well, hold on. They had the big three and Van Exel. What are you talking about? That was an offensive juggernaut. That was a specific style of scoring, right? Where, they didn't care about defense, just grab that ball and go and push and tempo. But I think that this is going to be a team that can score a lot of points. I think this is going to be a team that you can put in grind-out games, and their half-court offense will be legit. And I think that the difference is they will always have a really good, hard-rolling big man on the floor, whether it's Wright or Tyson Chandler. And with the shooters,
or Smith. I mean, that's what Greg Smith does too.
Smith.
He's a hard-rolling big guy.
And what does that do? That sucks the defense in, and you've got a bunch of different kinds of shooters on the floor, and you have multiple guys that can floor it. So it's a very difficult team to run off of the three-point line because they can get to the rim so quick. I think that we're going to, when they figure each other out and they feel good about one another, I think we're going to go, wow, this is the best all-around offensive team that we've ever seen roll through here, and that excites me.
That's exciting to me too, and I think that to piggyback off what you said, that they could be versatile, that they could play an up-tempo game. And look, their most successful time when Rick was here, their championship year, was play the flow offense, and then be a possession team, though. Really be micromanaged on defense, and so. Clearly, if they can get to that place, and they're in position to be very, very successful. But Brian was there last week. Remember last year, Rick said, we've got to get better defensively, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to defend the three-point line better. We're going to defend. We're going to not defend without fouling better. And I think transition defense, one-on-one defense. He cited all these things, and then you could go look at the numbers and see, well, yeah, they weren't very good at this, they weren't very good at that, on and on and on. And last week he spoke about it in a much more broader term, but it was pretty significant to me what he said, that we've got to find a way to get ourselves solidly in the top 10 in defense. Mm-hmm. And so that means you're making a jump from, I believe that they were 22nd in scoring defense last year. They were around 20th to 22nd in field goal defense, and I think they ended up being 19th or 20th in defensive efficiency. And so we're talking about a big leap. And you've added one clearly game-changing defensive player to the mix in Tyson Chandler. But, can he cover up for everybody's mistakes? Or is everybody going to be able to elevate their own games enough to not make as many mistakes? And is there going to be a team defensive mindset that's going to permeate this thing because of Chandler's presence and Chandler holding people accountable? And that's, not saying that it can't happen, but that's a big leap that Rick's asking those guys to make. I mean, he's saying we have to go from the bottom third and skip right over the middle third and go to the top third.
I want to throw this in if you guys don't mind, because it's tying into what Mark is saying. And this is why, another thing I'm excited about, this is why I'm so excited about Aminu being here and specifically working with Rick. Earlier today, doing this Cowboy segment or whatever, we're talking about Jason Garrett. And Jason Garrett being here long term and Jason Garrett working. And Brad Sham is talking about the Cowboys feeling good about Jason and giving him room to grow and allowing him room to grow. And Garrett's in a very unique position that a lot of first-time coaches aren't in. And Brad Sham even brings up Rick Carlisle and says, to me, Carlisle's the perfect coach and all this stuff. And this is activating all these different things in my mind. But one of the things it took me back to is, boy, I bet Rick would like another stab at the Detroit situation. I bet there's a lot of things as a first-time coach. Yeah. Even though he had success there, back-to-back 50-win seasons and Coach of the Year and all this, I bet there's things that he now knows that he would have done differently. And I'm thinking about all these things that go into coaching and all this.
Avery would probably like to have another stab at the Dallas situation, for example.
Avery didn't do anything different in Brooklyn. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair to Avery. But I always go back to this when we're talking about coaches. My dad was a coach. And one of the things my dad always told me was, he was like, look, if because my dad would always say, do this because you love this. Don't do this because I'm making you do this or whatever. But the games should be way secondary to how you feel about practice. And this wasn't this like Allen Iverson joke or whatever. His whole point was, you do this because you love it and you're dedicated to it. You are going to spend a far greater percentage of your time practicing than you are in the games. It's just simple math. So if you don't love practice and you don't love working on basic fundamentals, if you don't love that, go find something else to do. And I keep thinking about this with Rick and why Rick is an awesome coach. And maybe I'm overvaluing what my dad said, but it stuck with me. Rick.
You can never overvalue what your dad said.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just his dad or any dad?
No, any advice you got from your dad, you can never overvalue that.
Any dad.
I'm believing in Skin's dad a lot.
If you guys look at other NBA head coaches, I bet Rick far and away spends more time individually working with players.
And guys that have come here have said that over it every summer. We hear it from some other new guy here that says, I can't believe how much Rick works with
And if you don't believe players, current players, listen to Derek Harper, who played for Phil Jackson and Pat Riley in his career. You think Phil Jackson and Pat Riley are out rebounding for guys? Like, Rick is out. I mean, how many head coaches in the league rebound for guys getting shots up?
And it depends on the guy. Think about it. He's doing it for Ivan Johnson in the summer league.
Okay, but that's exactly where I'm going with this and why Rick is a coach. And I'm taking this back to what my dad says. The great moments are drawing up that play and telling Vince Carter in a frickin' NBA playoff game, telling him, they think it's going here. It's going to go to you in the corner. You be ready. I saw that. That happened 10 feet away from me because if you remember the way the broadcast went down, you guys dispatched me because we thought it's coming down.
Yep.
So I'm going down there, and then there's this long delay because the Spurs are doing the sideline thing with Corey Joseph or whatever, and I'm watching.
They tried to illegally substitute
they were
Corey
farting
Joseph.
around, and they basically got a fake timeout out of the deal.
And I'm
whole
watching.
process.
I don't know what Rick's saying to Vince. We find this out later, but I'm watching Rick tell Vince, here's how it's going to go. And here's where you're going to get the ball, okay? This is a play they ran many times, and Monte would curl, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so I'm watching. That's a glorious coaching moment, and that's like an awesome thing, right? But Rick spends way more time working with Ivan frickin' Johnson on improving his range, or Monte with his balance, or Corey Brewer. He does that because that's what he loves. He is a coach. And that is something that if you're a coach, you want to do that. I want to go work with this guy on his balance, on his jumper, and that's worth my time. You're going to spend way more of your time doing that stuff than you are drawing up the game-winning play. And to me, I look at that and I go, man, Rick Carlisle is an effing basketball coach. And that is an awesome asset, I think, for this organization.
I want to go to San Antonio 30 minutes. I want to go to shoot around 30 minutes early in San Antonio so I can work one-on-one with Dominique Jones, which I witnessed happen one time.
Dominique doesn't want to be there, but Rick wants to be there.
Right.
Dominique wants to shoot trick shots behind the frickin' bench.
I was just about to say that exact same thing. That story with him stuck with me like that. When I'm 50 years old, I'll be telling my kids about there was a guy that played for the Mavericks and he didn't give a shit. So you either need to care or quit.
Got a tattoo of the was it the logo on his calf and then the Larry O?
That was a good investment for
him.
It was.
But the reason I told this crazy, long, winding story that involved my dad and all this crap is that's the guy that's going to be working with Aminu, who is a lottery talent that has all this potential, and he's a kid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm super excited about. What does Rick do with that canvas? I can't wait. I think he could be some sort of Marion-type thing, and that's really exciting.
It is. I'm glad you brought it. It is one of my favorite moments in Mavs team history and Mavs broadcast history. The Vince Carter three-pointer at the end of Game 3. It's just I hate that the guy is gone, and I understand why it all happened. But that was such an unbelievable moment, capped by Skin's Peter Brady moment in the interview with Monte Ellis. All right, guys, Monte Ellis.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And we play that on the show all the time. And it's a magical moment.
It was a magical moment. Right up there, you were talking about Vince earlier, and before the moment gets away, did he talk about the Illuminati? You were talking about how, like, engaging it was and how, like, well-versed he was. Because I remember you got into this wild discussion. So did he talk about the Illuminati like you did with Deshaun Stevenson that time?
No, and I
you
actually
did talk with Deshaun about the Illuminati,
talked about
right?
the Illuminati with Deshaun Stevenson.
That's crazy because he's got portions of dollar bills tattooed on him, and you know what the dollar people say about the dollar bill and the pyramid.
Yeah,
and all
and plus
this.
he was anti-Jay-Z. Remember
Yeah,
that whole thing?
He was Soulja Boy.
Jay-Z is a part of the Illuminati.
I already love Deshaun. I love him 10 times more now.
That's one of the reasons I want Ivan Johnson on the team, because sometimes I look at him and go, is that Deshaun? Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah, I thought.
I bet you'd have something to say about the Illuminati, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But let's get him on the next MOR.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you brought up in terms of what concerns and excites you, because it's almost kind of flipped for me. But your story about Carlisle and Aminu is great, and that kind of alleviates my concern. Is I think too much is being anticipated with Aminu in terms of he's the Matrix Reloaded. Mm-hmm. That's what people are asking about him. Is he going to be that guy?
Vastly different player to me.
They're incredibly different, and I'm a little bit concerned about that to some extent. But then again, Carlisle is going to be able to sprinkle his magic coaching dust on him. And
Sean Marion's one of the most underrated, unique players in the history of basketball. And if you go look at his numbers, it'll blow your freaking mind. And I'm not talking about him going out there and being Sean Marion. What I'm talking about is this sort of guy that can cover multiple positions and get you some rebounds and some of those types of things. But you just look at the length and the sort of tenacity with which he plays. You go, there is an intangible thing there that can have a role on this team that could be very, very valuable.
There was one year where in his true Matrix heydays in Phoenix and the true salad days of Sean Marion, where he was in the top 5 in total rebounds and total steals. And David Robinson I was surprised that Olajuwon never did that.
Yep.
He was close, because Olajuwon was one of the few bigs who were mobile enough to not just stand in the lane and get rebounds and block shots, but had the mobility, and a lot of it contributed, to his soccer background, the quick feet, the quick hands and everything, and had the ability to get steals. Mm-hmm. And David Robinson and Sean Marion were the only people that have ever been in the top 5 in rebounds and steals in a season. So that should speak to, he's 6'7", and his rebound numbers and his versatility of guarding 4 different positions. And there were probably in his Phoenix days, I think, where D'Antoni would roll out crazy lineups where Sean would guard Yao.
Yeah.
He'd guard the 5-man too. So, yeah, he's clearly a very versatile player. And Aminu's, I like him, and I thought he had Maverick written on him for a long time because he's played so well against the team. And like I said, we seem to have a proclivity around here for signing players that play well against the Mavericks. But I don't think that he's he's not the Matrix Reloaded. But he's a nice player with a lot of upside, and I think has room to grow.
Nice callback to the intro press conference where the guy was so proud of himself for asking Aminu if he was the Matrix Reloaded.
Oh, well,
Do you
Skin
remember
said
that?
I didn't know. Skin's the one who called that. Or, no, you said it, right?
Yeah.
Brian.
But
there was a guy who said,
but I think
he said, "Can we call you the Matrix Reloaded?" And he was so proud of himself.
How high was that guy?
Yeah, he was
loaded.
he was very proud of himself.
I think there's just concern about asking too much too soon with Aminu, but I think he's going to be the most intriguing defender on the roster. And what excites me is Greg Smith, because he's a very capable rim roller, and I'm still not sure what he can be defensively, but I think he's going to learn a lot from Tyson, and he's already had great guys to learn from in Dwight Howard and Omer Asik in terms of defense and rebounding. The biggest concern is his health. Can he stay healthy for 82 games? That's the concern. But if he's able to, in a DeJuan Blair-like role for 12 to 16 minutes a night,
he looked overweight to me the other night.
Yeah.
Sorry to go all Chandler Parsons on him. And, when you're big, that's like a real delicate line, right? Like how much weight do you carry, and you want him to be a bruising big and all those things. Well, when I was watching him the other night, it's the context in which everyone fouled out 3 minutes into the game. Mm-hmm. But because those fouls were coming so fast and furious, and then he gets out on the floor, and I'm going, okay, I think he needs to knock a couple pounds off, because, the first thing that happens when you're out of shape is you're out of position. And the first thing that happens when you're out of position is you pick up fouls.
Right.
So, that's something that needs, in my opinion, needs to change.
I can agree with that, but I think I see very strong potential in him as a rim roller and a guy that can really wreak some havoc as an offensive threat when you don't have to run a single play for him.
You brought up a fascinating name, and that is something that we look back on, or I don't think we look back at it nearly enough. But this particular player that you just mentioned, I mean, I think he's going to have to be replaced, because if you look back at games in the San Antonio series, and particularly Game 6, I mean, one of the major reasons that Dallas took San Antonio to 7 games is because in Game 6, Rick felt like he couldn't play Dallenberg, and
rightfully so.
And Dallenberg, remember Dallenberg hurt his ankle, so who knows how healthy he was anyway. He hurt his ankle early on in Game 5.
Right.
And there was too much size with Duncan and Splitter out there, and couldn't play Brandon Wright because of the rebounding liability. So a major reason Dallas took San Antonio, the ultimate NBA champs, and played them harder than anybody else, is because they had a guy out there in DeJuan Blair who had a double-double in Game 6, and I think he might have had a double-double in Game 4, too, before he got kicked out of the game.
That Game 4, if we're one unfortunate ejection away from that game going down in Maverick lore as the DeJuan Blair game, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. He should have never ever punched Michael Finley in the nuts.
Yeah.
That was – is that what happened? Or
you're thinking of different suspension
Oh,
in San Antonio.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
It all runs together for me.
That player has to be replaced, and for the record, I don't think again, much different game, Greg Smith,
Yeah.
to me. I mean, Blair had, for a 6'7" nose guard, except nose guards aren't 6'7", of course, in the NFL, but, I mean, he had just so much bulk about him, so much mass about him.
Yep.
And then was, short, so undersized height-wise for a center. I mean, he had just, great hands, and he had this strange, almost nimbleness about him.
He had a floater.
Yeah,
he had a floater.
It was the weirdest floater I've ever seen.
He had a floater,
Well,
and he
outside
could-
of Marion's floater.
He could come out of a scrum with a ball where he was not only the shortest guy going for it, but had the least amount of leaping ability. He just sort of had a way. He knew how to position himself. He used his body in geometry, just in an outstanding way.
And there were a lot of matchups and games over the year where that player wasn't going to help you because of the limitations of it. And, I mean, I think it was for all of us, it was kind of a maddening time in the season when D'Alembert's alarm clock wouldn't go off. And then because, understandably so, they felt the need to, they felt like they couldn't count on him. So then we had to endure this stretch where Rick was starting DeJuan Blair at center and not trying to get D'Alembert back on track. They were so frustrated with him for that stretch in there, and that cost him some games because you can't roll with Blair as your starting center. But if you pick your spots with him, and we saw his spot was that San Antonio series last year, that is a player that again, like I said, I hesitate to say that you're going to have to replace him because it was such a unique role. But, but you're going to miss. I think you're going to miss something there.
And he's not. Again, he's not this guy. But Mark will tell you. I've talked about this. I wish there was a spot for Ivan Johnson. Just because not that I think he's Blair, but and this is really kind of like an Ortigal thing, right? Like the guy
that can screw up the game. That's a really cool thing to have. DeJuan Blair was a more talented version of that. Yeah,
and
Darryl Armstrong, great example of a guy who can screw up the game.
Yep, and I think Ivan Johnson's that, and I think to the point is like in that preseason game they went to Ivan Johnson to start the second half to cover Dwight Howard, so that Tyson Chandler wouldn't pick up fouls. And Dwight Howard wasn't backing down Ivan Johnson. He was a root.
Yeah. And then when he tried to, then he
forced a charge.
Yeah, he forced it. He went. He got taken down by that sniper in the top row of American Airlines Center, and ended up drawing an offensive foul.
In Deshaun Stevenson fashion.
Oh yes,
got assassinated.
There's an intrinsic value in being the guy that can go out on the court and being the one guy that's doing something completely divergent from the other 9. And having it be a positive for your team. And that's what Blair was able to do. Those guys are hard to find that you can also have contribute regularly on your roster.
There's an intrinsic value in being a guy out on the floor that none of the other 9 dudes want to jack with.
Yeah, that too. And we know that's Ivan Johnson. There's no kidding.
I like when kind of crazy dudes think one dude is crazy. I like having that guy on my team. Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
And then going back to Skin's point, the offense has got to be the most exciting thing to look forward to. Is we haven't even seen yet in the preseason, and we might even see it this weekend where Dirk, Monte, Chandler, Tyson, they're all out there, and you just say, throw the ball out, do what you can do.
Yep.
There's just so many different things they can do.
Jameer Nelson's a talented guy to be an offensive afterthought.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, what he is.
Do you remember, I mentioned this last week on the broadcast, and the point that Bear is repeating and will bear repeating on the broadcast several times this year. But in the years that Nelson played, his numbers across the board, shooting percentage-wise, went down in these last terrible 2 years that he had to endure in Orlando. But in the 8 years that he played alongside Dwight Howard, he was a 38.8% three-point shooter.
You'll take it.
Yeah.
Heck yes.
You will take it. The next interesting subject, and probably the last one we'll touch on, is Kevin Durant's injury radically shifts the dynamic in the Western Conference picture. How much does it actually influence Dallas, and where do you see them ending up when all is said and done?
Well, look, I mean, I think Oklahoma City is, they're not going to fall off the face of the earth in the time that Durant's out. And Durant's going to miss, so they're saying 6 to 8 weeks from now. So we're still 2 weeks away from the regular season starting. So he's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks of the regular season, which means worst case scenario, he's going to miss in the low 20s. He's going to miss a quarter of the season. So he's still presumably going to be there for 60 plus games this year. So I it's going to hurt them. and it may mean the difference between being a 1 or a 3 seed
Yeah.
whenever it's all said and done. But I'm in a believer, despite all of his zaniness. Our boy Jason Gallagher, talks about the Church of Russell Westbrook, and I'm a disciple in the Church of Russell Westbrook.
Do you dress accordingly in the Church of Russell Westbrook?
No, I don't do that. I don't wear glasses without
Okay.
lenses or shirts with fish on them or anything
Yeah.
like that. I don't do that. But I do think that Russell Westbrook is an incredibly talented and incredibly unique player, and he's going to do a lot of things for Oklahoma City that is going to keep them from having some sort of precipitous fall off without Durant.
Does he emerge as a top 5 player in the time that Durant's out?
He is a top 5 player. Russell Westbrook.
okay.
What Russell Westbrook is maybe the most underrated player in the NBA. It is absurd that people want to nitpick this guy's game. And when we got Monte Ellis, I specifically referenced Russell Westbrook. All right, it's like, quit telling me what he's not. You go try and stop him.
Mm-hmm.
You go try and stay in front of that guy. The number one thing you want in basketball in the pro game is you want to make a defense collapse and get wide open shots for people. He is the single outside of, LeBron. People cannot stay in front of him. We do Maverick games, and the guy who sits between us was a top-notch NBA point guard. In the day and age of the NBA point guard, let's get some sets going, and let's get you in your sets. And we'll sit there and we'll watch Westbrook, and
do all the sets.
I'll look at Harp, and Harp's like, he just got this look on his face like, damn. So a guy who's going to sit here and be able to tell you what a point guard should and shouldn't do is watching a player play that position that you can't account for. You just go, damn.
A guy who, let's also add, basically the hand check rule was put in no small part because of what he was able to do.
There's no doubt about it. And so, you can tell me all day long about, he's not efficient and this, that, and the other. And the guy, all right, go design a defense to where he doesn't get to the rim. And we talk about this all the time, what Monte does, for a team in terms of collapsing a defense and everything that's good that comes out of that. So, I've often thought that, he's the most underrated player in the league. He's got his flaws or whatever. Very few NBA players don't have flaws, but he can absolutely wreck a defense. And it just so happens that he's playing with one of the other top 5 players in the NBA, and they're both ball-dominant players, and so there's a rub there, and I get it. But, man, I'd take Russell Westbrook off your hands so fast. That guy is an absolute monster, and it's a joke to me, the criticism that he gets. He is an elite-level player.
And the biggest thing he's added in the past 2 to 3 seasons is that mid-range jumper.
This was like, we talked about this all the time. I always thought where Devin Harris never turned the corner that he needed to turn was he needed to be able to pull up on a dime from 15, 18 feet like Russ can.
Mm-hmm.
Devin never quite got that. And his balance wasn't quite to where he could drive that hard and pull up. He kind of leans and stuff. Westbrook can do something that he looks like a football player with the aggression with which he plays and the edge and the power and the speed. It's stupid.
And
he's stupid, what that guy can do.
And he's had substantial knee issues, and he still has that reckless abandon.
Yeah.
And that fearless nature.
He's a monster.
The worm turned for me for good with Westbrook whenever I saw, they had traded James Harden, and then Westbrook got hurt, and they could barely beat 8th-seeded Houston in the playoffs in 2013, and then got bounced out by Memphis when Oklahoma City got beaten by Memphis in 5 games the next round. And to see how freaking hard Durant had to work for everything that he was able to do, because he was on the floor with Reggie Jackson, Thabo Sefolosha, Kendrick Perkins, Nick Collison, Serge. I mean, the fact that your second most reliable option on offense had to be Serge Ibaka mid-range jump shots.
Yeah.
That the fact that can Serge Ibaka give you 15 points a game? I mean, when they didn't have Westbrook, that was really enlightening to me for what Westbrook brings to the table. Now will Westbrook be hampered because Durant's not out there opening up space and opportunities for him? I mean, I'm sure that's going to make some aspects of things difficult, but I still think that there's enough talent on that team that they'll be able to survive. But this is a real transitional is not the right word, but it's a real tipping point in the Oklahoma City franchise this year because of. I mean, isn't Scott Brooks in the last year of his contract now?
I'm not sure.
Free agency for Durant.
He's basically he's figuratively been in the last year of his deal for the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
He's always been on the verge of the hot seat in the eyes of the masses.
Free agency for Durant is looming, and there's just and now this injury with Durant exists, which I think in the long run may end up being as many minutes as that guy has played and as much of a beating and pounding and all the time that he's been out on the floor. I think there's some, you never want to, as a basketball player, talk about a foot injury, a broken foot. But I think that I think there's some small silver lining in this for Kevin Durant and what he might be able to do, because he looked exhausted to me in the playoffs last year.
And think about this, the nuance of this. A Jones fracture sounds like this real sort of delicate thing in your foot that causes a problem, where Fractured Jones sounds like a badass outside linebacker, that can rush the pass. Fractured Jones with another sack. But I always think about
Callaway.
I always think about Rick Carlisle when he was asked about James Harden not being in Oklahoma City anymore and talking about how it weakens them or whatever. He goes, "What are you talking about? That means the ball is in the hands of the other two guys way more, and they're way better players."
Yeah, you want to talk about underrated versus overrated. I think Harden and Westbrook are on the either side of that coin.
Yeah.
And we just established how you guys feel about Westbrook. I feel like the whole deal with criticizing Westbrook at this point has just become kind of a cheap opinion that people know they can have and get a few laughs out of posting a picture of Westbrook looking all happy. Kevin Durant broken foot out 6 to 8, and then put a picture of Westbrook there, kind of like partying. It's just kind of a cheap dollar menu deal now.
How old is he? Is he 26?
Westbrook?
No, yeah.
No, I feel like 24, 25.
Oh, so he's younger than that?
I want to say, he's 09 was 5 years ago, so he's probably 25.
Okay,
drafted in 2008 after 2 years at 2 years at UCLA. So.
Okay, so outside of Magic and
25.
Bird. Okay, 25. Outside of Magic and Bird, who are the 25-year-olds that knew how to win NBA Finals in NBA history? Who are they? Wasn't Jordan. Show me the guys. Show me the 24 and 25-year-olds that knew how to win NBA Finals. Man, beating up Russell Westbrook is the lowest hanging fruit, and it's dumbass talk. He's a baller. He is a absolute effing baller.
So we know how Skins feels.
Yeah, so it sounds like So you were talking about the West playoff picture, Brian. It kind of sounds like these guys have OKC penciled in at 1 or 2.
Westbrook's winning the West is what I just heard.
Yeah.
Well, they're a top 3 team to me still.
Yep.
They're going to lose a few more games without Durant than they probably would have, but I still think that they're the tier of the West. The top tier of the West is San Antonio, the Clippers, and Oklahoma City.
Totally.
And
3 or 4 games lower than that is the next tier.
The next tier, I think there's a great chance for Dallas and Golden State to be battling for the 4-5 position.
Do you think Portland's in that mix?
I see Portland as a team that slides back just a little bit. I mean, I felt like that if you look at and I like a lot of aspects of their team, but they still didn't do much to improve a bench that wasn't very good.
Wasn't Chris Kaman the biggest addition?
And then you swap out Mo Williams went out and Steve Blake's in. And then I guess you probably have to hope if you're them. I mean, you drafted C.J. McCollum in the lottery, and then
he can play.
Yeah. So if
he makes a jump,
if he takes a step, then your bench is better by virtue of that. They didn't go out and make additions. You're counting on an in-house rise of can C.J. McCollum be a better player? And look, they've got another lottery pick on their team that has languished and done nothing in 2 years, and maybe he can't do anything, and that's Myers Leonard. I mean, Myers Leonard was a lottery pick.
The white Tyson Chandler is how he was billed.
He ain't that.
No, he ain't that. But he's got a special haircut. He is the 80s bad guy in a John Hughes movie. His hair is really unbelievable what he's doing with it. But they could have sort of like a Detroit Pistons kind of thing with a 3-guard rotation where McCollum is playing some point when Lillard's out, and then those two can play together as well. I mean, the times that those guys came in and we saw McCollum, I was like, whoa, that dude has got some really unique abilities
he
that
didn't
I
rock
probably
my world in the same way that he did yours. But I know that, look, I mean, he's a lottery pick and was a 25-point-per-game scorer against mid-major competition, of course, at Lehigh in college. But, I mean, look, he was on a Lehigh team that knocked Duke out of the NCAA tournament, and that really helped get his shine on.
Yeah.
In terms of people being interested in him. So,
But you're right. They need him to have a big year.
yeah, to me, here's how I look at Portland, man, and I think you and I had this discussion last year. They went 31-9 in the first 40 games of the season, and if you go back and look at game by game, and look at how many of those 31-9 start, an inordinate amount of close victories. Like 12 of their first 13 games that were decided by 6 points or less were wins.
All the ones that Minnesota couldn't get,
Yes.
they ended up getting.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. They were the anti-Minnesota Timberwolves last
yeah.
year, who lost Minnesota lost their first 11 games decided by 4 or less
It was
last year.
nuts.
Yeah, so that sort of thing. I don't agree. Hollinger used to point to the Mavs and say, well, the Mavs win so many close games, and that's just a year-to-year thing. So I do think that there is an art to winning the close game. However, when the number is that one-sided, okay, there's an art to winning the close game, but that's a little – I would say that's a little bit that's freakish. To win 12 out of 13 games at the beginning of a year that are decided by 2 possessions, within 6 points, so or 7 or 8, whatever it was. But so from 31-9, then all of a sudden the law of averages kind of caught up with them on some of those close games, and they went 23 and 19 for the rest of the season. And so I see them a lot more along the lines of a 49, 50-ish win team, not a 54 win team like they were last year.
Let me ask you about Golden State. Do you think it's just so much Curry and Thompson negate a rookie head coach?
Well, I think Steve Kerr, look, I loved him as an analyst. I think he has a tremendous feel for the game. There are going to be game management things, and he talked at the NBA broadcast meetings this year and certainly did recognize that there's going to have to be some things that he's going to need some help on in terms of, when you sit in the big chair, you have game management decisions that you've never had before. But I have immense amounts of respect for Steve Kerr and his feel of the game, his knowledge of the game. Heard it in the analyst chair for so many years, and being a general manager in Phoenix, I don't know that aspect of things necessarily gets to shine, but I think they're going to be okay. I mean, granted, the NBA is a hard-ass league for a coach, and there's so much coaching and so much management of personality and such that goes on, but I think he's going to be all right.
I think it'll be easier for Derek Fisher than it is for him because of the conference they're in. I think about this in terms of we were talking about this. I'm sure you guys enjoyed the idea of Michael Young being a manager, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I don't think you walk out of retirement to manage a club. You need to. I think you need to spend some time on the bench in some ways. Now it's a little different for Kirk because, like you said, he had been in the front office and all those sorts of things. But in the West, you got a tough game like every night. I mean, I think Derek Fisher.
And basketball and baseball are different, man.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, basketball, there is, baseball, there's so much strategy and, there's so much mental nuance to the game, and not to infer that there isn't in basketball, but there's an element of the game. Is different. There's an element of the game of basketball where players, players in the NBA and at the highest level, to demand their respect, you've got to have something about you that helps give you credibility and demands respect. And so, I think a guy going from playing to coaching whenever, like Jason Kidd or Derek Fisher, and Steve Kerr, granted, he's not going straight from playing to coaching, but he is a first-time head coach. But I think he's got, he played with Jordan. He's been a general manager. Guys have watched him analyze games on television with Marv Albert for 5 years now.
Right.
I think he's got enough skins that he's going to command respect.
But this is where I wanted to go with this, and he brought up Jason Kidd. It was problematic for Jason Kidd that at the end of games early in the season, someone else walked in and took over. Mm-hmm. Okay, because guys are going, what? Yeah, now who do I listen to? Who's the important guy here? So you better know what to do at the end of games immediately. One of the best things Rick Carlisle had going for him was being Larry Bird's right-hand man and being involved in the end-of-game decisions and all that sort of stuff. And actually not just like – because you think about it differently as a player and a coach, and you're processing all that differently. And so there's going to he's going to be 2 weeks into the season, and their team's going to be down 1 with 5 seconds to go, and he's going to be holding a clipboard. And he's going to have to come up with the right thing. And that absolutely matters. And I thought it was very problematic for Jason Kidd Now
I thought he figured that out somehow
He did.
as the year. I mean, I thought that team took on a real different personality from January 1st on.
I would agree with you,
Yeah.
but also don't you think having Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce
Having
and
the
all
help
these
come
guys?
around.
I mean, it was, to me, it was comical that frickin' Lawrence Frank is in there drawing up plays with 4 seconds to go. That ain't a good look, man. I don't care who you are.
Who's Golden State staff now? Because I feel like
That's what I wanted to look up. And
didn't
I'm
he
not,
bring in a veteran, a former head coach? I mean, that seems to be the kind of
And,
thing.
and in fairness, Mark Jackson had Malone to
Michael Malone. Yeah, that's right.
to help him out with those things. But also, Mark Jackson is a commanding presence in a huddle. Like, when they show the clips or whatever, he's got your attention. He absolutely has it. He's got that gift. I was always curious about how J-Kid, would do in those situations where he's whispering in a huddle, and everyone's like leaning. Wait, hold on. What are you saying? I'm leaning and I can barely hear you. But, he's, kid can get around all that stuff, and he commands people's attention.
No
and
question,
all that.
no question.
So do you think then Portland and Golden State flip in terms of the win-loss record, where Golden State
it was 6 last
bumps
year.
up a 3 more wins to 54?
Sure. I think Golden State. I mean, I think Golden State and Dallas. I mean, if everybody stays healthy, then I think they're primed to battle for 4 and 5. And then I think you're looking at Houston, Portland, Memphis as your 6, 7, 8. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure that there's anybody who was on the outside of the picture looking in last year that's poised to make a jump. I mean, there was a pretty significant. I mean, Phoenix. I guess Phoenix is the team.
Phoenix
that was
is
right.
the only team. I think.
Yeah, Phoenix was the team that was right outside of that. But man, it's hard for hard for me to get my head around them having the magical year that they had last year.
I also the team I have the toughest time figuring out is Memphis. I think Mark Gasol's an absolute game changer, man. He missed a lot of time last year, and they also they changed their
They won
identity.
A bunch of 22 games by 6 points or less that they won last year too. So there's that thing again.
They were suddenly going to be this tempo team.
Yeah, they end up being last in the league in pace again.
Right. So I don't know how to get a read on them. I just know that Mark Gasol is a game changer, man. And if he's healthy, I think he has such a huge impact.
But the only thing that they added of significance, to my knowledge, is Vince Carter.
Vince Carter.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back to your point, Alvin Gentry is the associate head coach in Golden State.
Okay.
So
He's
the lead.
hasn't had a ton of. I mean, guy's been a head coach a lot. Has not had a ton of success as a head coach, but that will be a voice that can help with game management and that sort of thing on the sideline.
He was coaching in Phoenix when Kerr was there as the
Yeah,
GM.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And he had some brief and not very successful stints, I think, with Detroit and the Clippers.
Clippers,
along the
yeah.
way, too.
Clippers when he
Yeah.
broke in, and then
So you don't see Phoenix getting enough magic or good juju to bump up into the 8th spot. You think it was too much lightning in a bottle last year?
Yeah, I have a hard time getting my head
it
around
felt
that.
like last year, like we were just sitting there with
We're
with
waiting
with
for the
holding
bottom
it
to
out.
fall
Yeah,
out.
holding our breath exactly. So
But so many the best minds in the game last year. The guys that I really respect: Stein, Zach Lowe. On down the list. I mean, everybody who was a great basketball analyst last year. That writes a lot. Who pegged Phoenix for being? Nobody pegged them for that, and there was a reason for that. And so a lot of players exceeded expectations last year. Can they be counted on to do it again? And I could be wrong, but
Didn't Eric Bledsoe only end up playing like 46 or 48 games last year?
yeah, he was basically out of the mix from the 1st of January until early March.
It's so funny. I thought, in hindsight, I was like, man, one of the best stories or most amazing stories of last year was Eric Bledsoe and Dragic being able to play together. I was like,
But
then
they
I saw,
really
well,
did.
he only played like half the season.
Yeah.
I also, Dragic is mystifying to me because his first year in Phoenix after signing the 3-year deal, I was like, I'm glad the Mavericks didn't sign him. That guy, just dribbles around till he's ready to fling it. Last year he was spectacular. However, we were watching Phoenix games at the end of the year because it was all so close there. And my God, he had some just garbage moments where he literally shot that team out of the playoffs. So I'm still not sure what he is.
I think he turned his ankle there in one of those games late in the season.
Yeah.
I think he was playing on kind of a tender ankle for a few games there at the end. But
So is he really? Did he end up getting third team
All-NBA,
All
third
NBA?
team, yeah, absolutely.
Is he that? I don't know if he is or not. Maybe he drops back a little bit. Who knows?
But maybe
what his
Zoran
Zoran.
Dragic is there
Don't
to be
forget
the game
Zoran,
changer.
though, man.
Yeah.
Zoran. There was a movie about him, right? It's
Don't-
an Adam
don't
Sandler
mess with
movie.
Zoran.
Yeah,
Zohan.
that was a weird movie.
Is there any way you see Dallas not making the playoffs, even if they're
sure,
healthy?
something-
Well, if they're healthy. if they're healthy. Is there any way?
No way in hell.
No.
No way in hell.
No. I don't see that.
I love that confidence.
I'd be surprised.
It'd be unbelievable.
All due respect to everybody, I'd be surprised if they're not hosting playoffs in the first
So you
round.
think they can go to 4?
I
agree with that.
I think they're right there.
They're battling.
They're battling.
Golden State's damn good, man.
Yeah.
They're a good team, and
It's a tough place to play.
Tough place to play. I mean, to me, Dallas, Golden State fighting it out for 4 or 5 is where, in my mind, the smart money is. We'll see, but I think that's a very, very realistic possibility.
Do you see Houston hovering maybe as low as 7?
Sure.
6 or 7. Yeah. I mean, I think there's going to be a drop-off from being a 54-win team last year. I mean, you've lost a guy that we all think clearly is going to elevate Dallas and Parsons, and you've replaced him with Ariza, who's a nice player, but he's not going to give you the same thing.
He's a blend player.
You know, and then there's just, I mean, I wish I brought my notes from last week's Houston game, but, man, there's just a lot of guys from 9 to 15 on that roster, man, who are just unknowns.
I don't know what their bench is.
specialists.
I don't know what it is.
It
Well,
said
the-
they
okay.
lost some guys, but I will say that
Yeah, they traded Jeremy Lin and Oshik for nothing.
for nothing. Did you guys read though
Nothing tangible in terms of a player, anyway.
I'm sure you guys did. Y'all absorbed so much of this stuff. Did you read the Wojnarowski article about Dwight Howard is back? Mm-hmm. Now we didn't see it in the preseason game, but he wrote this piece, and I've always, you know, a lot of Maverick fans we bow up. Well, I don't want Dwight Howard. He's not a winner and all this stuff. And the point of the piece was be ready because this is the Orlando Magic Dwight Howard you're about to see. He's finally 100% healed from his back issues.
Oh, was this the thing where they talked about how they mismanaged it in L.A.?
Yeah, that was part of it.
Okay.
And then part of it was Trevor Ariza going, wow, he looks like he did 4 years ago. I was surprised when I walked in the door. And I just felt like, it's kind of one of those things where people like to write him off and say he's a clown and doesn't care and all this stuff. He is one of the most ridiculously freakish, dominant players of the last 20 years. And the point of now I realize Wojnarowski is like just holding on to Daryl Morey's ankles, going, "Tell me more, master." But that was the point of the article: is be prepared for the Dwight Howard that dominated the league 4 years ago because his back is finally healthy.
Okay, but so their bench is going to be – I'm just trying to go off memory from the notes we did for the game last week. So Ish Smith and Isaiah Cannon will be their backup point guards right now. I don't think they have anything else on their roster that's suited to play backup point guard. Behind Harden, not that you necessarily need somebody to play a lot of 2, but Papa Nicolau is in that 2-3 mix.
What a fake name.
He's about to drop Donjatis Machajunas on us.
Dante.
Hey, man, he was the best
He was
player on
good.
the floor for
He
them
was.
last
He
week.
scored like 14 in that game.
That is the most difficult style of fighting to master. It is very challenging.
Yeah.
He was good for them. So,
He
so
was.
he's in the mix with Terrence Jones at 4.
About Adrian.
Yeah, he's not bad. Yeah, he's not bad. I mean, he deserves a shocking note of my early 2014-15 NBA season was preparing for the Houston broadcast last week and seeing that in the 28 games Jeff Adrian played with Milwaukee, that guy averaged 11 points and 8 rebounds a game.
Wow.
After he got traded to Milwaukee from Charlotte last year. So
Guys go to Milwaukee,
gotta-
they do things,
yeah.
and you don't even know it happens.
Somebody's got to score the points,
Yeah.
even on a team that wins 15 games like Milwaukee.
And somehow Mayo couldn't stop that up.
No, it just didn't happen.
Shocker.
Instead, people talked about him gaining weight and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's on an old Mayo diet.
Yeah.
Did you look at their depth chart? I mean, what
Yeah,
else is...
I mean, looking behind Dwight, it's Joey Dorsey and Clint Capella.
Okay,
That's it.
Dorsey's not even make the team.
Hey, wait a
That guy's not
second.
gonna make the team, and Clint Capella is
Style of singing, right? Where
light
there's no
years
music
now.
accompaniment.
light years away.
Is
from
this
being
is
able
this
to
our
contribute, I
Josh
think.
Powell?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is.
Well, there.
He's not going to make that team.
No, he's not
I
gonna make
counted
the
it
team.
up. He's not.
They've got
one of
him
their top
on-
15.
No,
How
he's
long
not
does
going to
he
make
even
the
go
team.
with the
Oh, well,
shaved
why
head?
does he
'Cause it
have-
took me
Yeah, I
aback
don't know.
last week.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why does he have? Why do I have him at 1.3 million? They just have that plugged in as.
There's 3 guys ahead of him on
Probably
that
on an
depth chart.
unguaranteed.
By that time,
that's his minimum number.
We're
but
all getting
he's-
old.
Yeah,
That's
he's
what that
unguaranteed,
means.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But going back to what you said, I don't know outside of 7th or 8th on in their rotation.
Okay, well, who's listed? Who's the backup behind James Harden? I don't remember
behind
the
James Harden, it's Jason Terry.
Okay.
Oh, forgot about
so he hadn't played yet.
He hasn't
No.
played yet.
Right.
Then they have Jordan Hamilton, Troy Daniels,
No, Jordan Hamilton's not there now.
But Troy
Daniels.
Troy
yeah.
Daniels is shooter.
That's the dude that hit the crazy shot in the playoffs,
Against
right?
Portland,
Yeah.
Lord.
He's the guy last year that the massive he was the poster child for the experimentation of the Rio Grande Valley D-League team, where he took 760 some odd shots last year, and 600 of them were threes, and then of the other 160, about 130 of them were in the restricted area.
Wow.
Yeah, he took 90.
Feast or famine.
He took 92 or 93% of his shots were either 3-pointers or in the restricted area. The guy's like nothing mid-range.
The exact opposite of Rolando Blackman.
Precisely.
Like you couldn't be any more opposite from Rolando Blackman.
You're gonna say this with any team, but I think Houston is probably one of the top teams that say if you lose one of your key guys, I don't know what you're gonna do.
Right.
Well, and is James Harden going to improve in any fashion as a basketball player? I feel like the bloom is way off the rose on that guy.
It's everyone's saying
He's
is
first team All-NBA
what can he
last
do
year,
defensively? That's the area he can try to improve. His
First,
defense.
I mean, I think he was second in the league in free throws made last year. First team All-NBA, and granted, just like I made that point, we were talking about voting Ella's third team last year. There were a ton of guards who would have been in the mix. I mean, look at all the guards who normally are All-NBA team vote guys, and they didn't play enough or were out all year, basically, to not even get a vote. Derrick Rose, Kobe, Russell Westbrook only played 50 games last year. Dwayne Wade, I don't think you could have voted for Dwayne. They had to manage his minutes to the tune of 50 games. And I don't think you can vote for a player. When you play 50 of 82 games, I don't think, durability and being there night in, night out is part of the equation of why you would be considered one of the best players in the game. And if you're only there 60% of the time, then I don't think you can be up for consideration for that.
I think that's going to be a fascinating thing, though, this year about James Harden. Is their second and third best shot creators from last year are gone.
Right.
And Parsons and Lynn. Patrick Beverly ain't creating anything for anybody. Trevor Ariza's waiting to catch and shoot. He's going to literally be in – you talk about usage rate and all that. Good Lord.
Yeah.
It's all going to be him creating for other folks. He's going to be like – he's going to be what Westbrook is in Oklahoma City while Kevin Durant is.
Did you just see that?
I did.
Did you just see two 49ers run into each other?
We need to pause real quick so Skin can actually see this replay, even though it's a great point.
Yeah, Vance McDonald, the tight end. I don't know who that is. Is that Vernon Davis?
Yeah, that's Vernon Davis. Okay, Skin.
Here's the replay. All right, so
check this out,
Kaepernick is rolling right. He's going to throw into the end zone here, and watch this, dude. Check this out. And
okay, so
that's like the old VHS they used to send you with the subscription to Sports Illustrated. That's the kind of shit that's on there.
The Cowboys yesterday. This is how different seasons can go. The Cowboys were 1 second away from Terrence Williams and Jason Witten doing that.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. You're right.
But going back to your point, it's James Harden having to do everything.
Then how does he respond to that responsibility, and how does that mesh with what we know a Dwight Howard successful offensive blueprint should look like?
He will embrace that opportunity with the biggest basketball erection anybody has ever had.
Wow.
Every single time? Woohoo! It's a dream of mine!
But then the thing is, can he do all of that and still find a way to improve defensively?
He won't try.
Yeah,
no,
he can't.
Of course not.
He can't afford to.
No.
When you have to tote the note that big, you don't even try. He's like, my responsibility.
He's already on that.
And he's got a head coach.
It's not just that, but I mean, I think a lot of people have looked at Houston and it's like, well, okay, well, what's their defensive identity? What's their defensive game plan? What's their defensive strategy?
Well, but I think that they have a chance to actually I think they have a chance with their personnel to be better defensively because Ariza is a really good defender. I love Patrick Beverly. So James Harden will get to cover the guys that Jose Calderon covered last year.
Yeah.
He'll get to be, between 1 and 3, he will cover the weakest offensive player and, cover the Tony Allens and all those kinds of guys. And he will tote the offensive note, and Patrick Beverly and Trevor Ariza will do all the heavy lifting.
They're going to miss Parsons more than they are letting on.
Oh yeah. If you have literally one offensive creator on your team, yes. Losing Lynn, I know he's
I mean,
kind of
unless you consider Howard a creator. I mean, just because he's not driving to the basket, that doesn't mean that he's not creating offense. I mean, throwing it to him and letting him back somebody down.
Sure.
As unrefined of his post game still remains to be this day, he's still got so much brute strength that he can overpower people.
I would agree with that. But I'm just talking about from the standpoint of getting people into stuff. You know.
Okay.
In other words, he's still reliant on something coming
Right.
his way.
Right.
But I know what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
he compromises
Sure.
the defense. Absolutely.
Who has a more refined post game, Dwight Howard or Blake Griffin?
Blake Griffin, I think.
Blake
It's
Griffin's
it's a dramatic difference.
Dude,
so-
he's a monster.
Yeah.
You guys read all the stuff about 3-point shooting, right?
Yeah.
He's pushed his range out.
I think that's a mistake.
That you've heard that from various teams over the course of this offseason and preseason. They're trying to sprinkle that big man to add.
Because everybody wants
It's
a
just
big.
like when Amari Stoudemire got into that mode late in his Phoenix days, and oh hey, I'm expanding my range. I'm gonna people are gonna have to step out to cover me now. It's like, look, if Amari when he wasn't tomahawk dunking,
right,
then I consider that if you want to shoot from 23 feet instead of putting your arm up to your elbow through the rim, okay, man, have at it, dog.
That is post microfracture Amare though. I mean, you can't be, shot out of the cannon pogo stick guy after the microfracture.
He was still doing some of that for a year or two after. I mean, I still think he was a pretty damn impressive force around the rim for a year or two after that.
Yeah,
I thought he was.
Don't you guys think that Blake Griffin's a top 5, top 6 NBA player?
I want to hear your list since you're so
LeBron.
Okay.
Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Blake Griffin, and then I would probably put Chris Paul in there. I think I could argue I might take Chris Paul out and put Dwight Howard in there. I think he changes things dramatically, but I think those are your 5 guys that are the best in the league. Sorry, Carmelo, I like you, but not that much. Sorry, Steph Curry. I think I might like Dame Lillard more than you. No offense.
See, Steph Curry would of the guys that you rattled off, Steph Curry would be the guy that I would argue that I would have wanted to put in there because there's.
You'd put him ahead of Paul?
No, I don't necessarily put him ahead of Chris Paul, but the fact that. But I might look at him. I mean, where Russell Westbrook has the unique skills that you're talking about and can do things that you can't stop, Steph Curry can do things that, I mean, like when even Popovich was like, you can't give this guy any airspace. And it's like, even if you don't give him any airspace, he is the greatest shooter that we know in the game.
He's
right
certainly
now.
the best shooter I've ever seen off the dribble, literally.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know I don't even know what to compare what he does to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just going back. Sometimes I feel like there's like Steve Nash things, but Nash doesn't have the incredible stupid range.
Right, yeah.
Like
Wasn't there- it's
timeline
unconscious range.
That was Nash was a penetrate and step back or that
Or
type
he would
of thing.
do all these weird release point things
Yes,
and get into the lane
yeah.
and do
Very-
that sort
much
of
more
stuff.
of a
thing
crafty.
about the efficiency of movement where there's like not one wasted motion. Like, they do these studies about like, what a guy does with the ball and like movement with the body. And they had these articles I'm sure you remember about Nash does not waste one motion with the way that he executes, his drives and these things, where I feel like there's this thing where Curry there's never like that time, where the guy's like suddenly going between his legs and do all this stuff. He goes between his legs to get somewhere else.
Yeah.
There's never this moment where it's just like
It's almost
right.
like when I think of Steph Curry, obviously I think of Del Curry, and in the giant filing cabinet in my brain, there's this group of guys from the late '80s and early '90s that we regarded as these just really great, just lead-footed spot-up shooters, guys like Del Curry and Dale Ellis and
Craig Hodges.
Chuck Person or Wesley Person, sorry, and guys like that.
No, you were right, Chuck Person, the
I guess
rifleman.
both of
He
them,
was
yeah.
there.
So it's like those guys, you regarded them in this sort of super accurate machine-like thing, and it's like Curry is all that because that's his dad, but he moves.
Mm-hmm.
He does it while he moves.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody shoot with range off the dribble like that with that kind of accuracy. You know who we need to probably make room for? I don't want to do it yet, but I think this is a season where we change things. Anthony Davis is very likely on that list.
He's got to stay healthy.
Well, then if he's going to do that, if he's going to make that move, then we completely ignored the Pelicans in the West conversation.
Oh, and we shouldn't. I would put the Pelicans probably ahead of Phoenix.
So you think they're nipping on the heels for a playoff spot?
Yeah. They cause problems for people.
They were decimated by injuries last year,
Yeah.
so they'll have to be healthy. And they've already had one. I mean, not that I'm not never have been a huge Tyreek Evans fan. But, I mean, he is hurt, and he is, he is a significant player on that team.
How many games did Holiday miss last year? I think
from about the first week of January or second week of January on.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player. The thing about Anthony Davis, before I put him in that list, is I don't know what his go-to thing is yet. They say that his perimeter range is really good, and he can knock that down now. But I don't ever recall seeing him post up. I don't know that he does that.
Not strong enough.
Not strong enough. Yeah, he doesn't have a base. We're back to that. But he scores with offensive rebounds and transition and rolls and those sorts of things where it's, and they've got some creators and those sorts of things. So when he has some sort of thing that he can go to and you give it to him and he gets you a bucket, that's when he enters the fray. He's on the verge of it because of his defense and athleticism and all these unique things he does. It's very Kevin Garnett-like. But I think, he's got to have that thing before he steps into the conversation.
Anthony's not the studio gangster that Kevin Garnett was.
No.
You know what, though, man? I think we do this all the time with older players, is we forget what they were in their prime because we've been consumed with their later years as of late. Go back in time, baby.
No.
And look at Garnett.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
He was
Holy
legit.
balls,
Yeah.
man. That guy was so effing good. And when Dirk clowned him in the playoffs, I thought it was special.
Yeah.
Because I held Garnett in such high
Yep.
esteem. I was like, wow, our guy's better than him. That's some shit right there.
And people thought, and to compare, it's like, Garnett he's such this intense guy, and he's such this intimidating presence. And then for Dirk to be able to succeed against that.
Yes.
That's what made that even more, not just that he clowned a good player, but that he clowned a good player who people thought that, Garnett, he's got this way about him. He can take Dirk out of his game because of his length and his intimidation factor and all that, and his intensity. And
The Boston game in Dallas where Garnett was like, man, I'm getting clowned and got a tech and sat his ass down because he didn't want anymore.
Right.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
I'm just going to say on Steph Curry, though, last year, I think he ended up being, I know at one point in time, he was the league leader in percentage of points responsible for. Be either the points that he scored or the baskets that he assisted on. There was no player in the league who was more responsible for his team's offensive points by percentage than Steph Curry was. He is a freak.
And that's where the Nash stuff comes from, I think, too. Because he does every single thing.
Yeah, because he's out there. He's not just scoring 23 points a game,
Yeah, he's
making
creating.
ridiculous shots, but he's out there averaging 8.2 assists or whatever it was that he averaged.
Okay, in hindsight, give me any of those guys. I'm happy.
Yeah.
think I can do something with those guys.
Rylan, anything else on the West and how the Mavs fit in?
I think you guys are right on point with this is a 5 knocking on 4 kind of a deal, looks like to me. I struggle with Golden State. I guess I maybe expected too much out of them last year, and so I'm maybe a little down on them this year. But,
Well,
They were the trendy pick last year, and they
Yeah.
ended up about a 6.
Well, they were the
7?
6th seed, and
Yeah.
an incredibly difficult. Look, they won 4 or 5 more games than they did the year before. They were in an incredibly difficult conference, and they took a very good 3rd seed to a 7th game. They won the year before because they were able to get matched up against, a strange Denver team that was, really built well for the regular season and was fantastic at home. But, there was something weird about, we always, I think, thought there was something kind of weird about those George Karl Denver teams, especially post-Carmelo.
Right.
They didn't have a go-to guy
Right.
that you could count on in pressure, clutch situations and playoff times.
Right.
So then they played a hell of a series against San Antonio, but they were, in many regards, a better team last year. But they got matched up against a team in the playoffs that had home court advantage, and it got to a 7th game, and they were able to exploit that. And you had, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin out there, and
Boy.
that was the thing that the go-to guys that Denver didn't have when Golden State upset Denver the year before.
And the defining moment of that series is Chris Paul fouled Curry on the step back, and he
Yeah.
didn't get the call.
That's right. Yeah.
That's, to me, the defining moment of that series.
And Doc Rivers' performance in the face of an unbelievable, in the face of, could there have been? I don't think there could have been. And gosh, it's crazy. That's not that far back in our lives, but so much has happened
so
since then.
yeah.
It seems like it was so long ago.
Yeah.
But could there have been a better person to navigate those waters and lead that team through what was just an unimaginably effed up situation? Doc Rivers was the perfect. He was, as much as Doc Rivers, didn't want to have to deal with that. He was the right guy in the right place at the right time for that to manage that particular situation.
No doubt about it.
So if you'd had a lesser coach, then maybe Golden State's poised for another upset when LA's heads are wherever they were when they were having to deal with that whole mess.
Doc is a leader of men. There is zero doubt.
No doubt about that. Yeah, absolutely.
How insane is the prospect of a Dallas Golden State 7-game series?
Oh, that's just sphincter muscles just constricted to just unimaginable proportions. So
there's that's balls to the wall insane.
Yeah,
that kind of series.
That would be a great series. I mean, I would love it, and it's just, man, that place to me there are two arenas that exceed anything I've ever heard in my life, and it's Golden State in 2007, and the We Believe, and which there was a time when hated bringing that up, but don't matter now.
You know what?
Everything
It doesn't bother me at all.
Don't matter now.
Yeah.
And then 2011 Portland, when
the Rose Garden was
the Rose
insane.
Garden in Game 4 during the comeback, which of course we can bring that up because don't matter now.
They won it.
It was the springboard for it. But keep in mind that in Game 6, the same damn thing nearly happened. The Mavs got up 17 late in the third quarter, and then they messed around and they came out of a timeout and Dirk threw the ball away and Gerald Wallace went to the other end and dunked, and it was when Gerald Wallace could play. Remember that?
Remember before Gerald Wallace passed away?
And then he dunked it. It was a 1-point game with 5 minutes to go, and Kidd and Terry and Dirk all kind of took over, and were able to nurse that thing home. Hit some big shots that they couldn't hit when the whole thing fell apart in Game 4. But the decibel level when Brandon Roy hit the 4-point play, when Gerald Wallace dunked in Game 6, I mean the
floor was
energy
shaking.
of that place
shaking.
Is insane. And Oklahoma City rather has a great crowd too. But man, Portland in 2011 and Golden State in 2007 are nuts. And so that's what you would have to deal with if the Mavs and Golden State played in a 4-5 series. To me, that would be really scary because Steph Curry again. I'm in the church of Steph Curry and watching.
You're in a lot of
churches. I am. I'm broad-based religion. Very accepting of a lot of different things kind of guy. And
he did it to the Mavs twice last year.
I mean Calderon was actually guarding him pretty well on that shot. Remember the overtime game late in the year when they blew the Jermaine O'Neal goaltending call? Yeah.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
That was.
That was after Ed Malloy though, so we weren't supposed to be mad.
Yeah.
That
see, it all evened out. Yeah.
But there's a long way to go between the playoffs and now.
The thing I remind everyone is that an NBA season is full of so many unforeseen twists and turns. And, who would have believed when you were texting us last week about, hey, remember, we're going to do the podcast on Monday night? Why on earth would we have ever thought we'd be sitting here talking about a Kevin Durant injury that's going to cost him a month of the season or more?
Yep.
I mean, there's just... there's so many things that we just, that are around the next corner that we have no earthly idea what's coming our way, that, it's all just throwing stuff up against the wall right now.
But it's probably the most anticipated season we're about to witness in quite some time.
Well, TV's certainly hoping so, as they're getting ready to fork over $24 billion.
Yes.
So they're hoping that the anticipation is going to keep on growing.
Well, not just even in the league, but in the Mavs sense.
No question.
I don't know the last time. I don't know what the team was. I was trying to think about this the other day. I don't know what the team was that my expectations were this high. I liked the 2011 team, but they became something way more than I thought that they would be.
Of course.
But I liked him. I really, though, I'm trying to think. I think probably the most anticipated season was the year after the 67 win season, going into that season because they were coming off the finals. I think that's probably.
Yeah, and everybody, it was going to be the year of rectifying unfinished business.
Right.
Yeah.
But my expectations are very, very high. This is going to be a really good team.
Yeah, it's nice to shake off. The previous couple years since the title have been started with just sort of a little bit of a pall over everyone, and I think that the Mavs have,
well, especially Dirk getting hurt. I mean, I think
that was
people have
terrible.
viewed the 3 years post-title, with a lot of negativity and a lot of disdain, and I mean, look, they had a year in there where they missed the playoffs, and I think that for a year there, Father Time caught up with Dirk.
Yeah, and it was just
when your best player misses, and clearly he was far and away your best player, and the fulcrum on which everything else was built around and centered on, I mean, when your best guy misses a third of the season and then isn't himself for another third of the season, is only remotely resembling his true self for the final third of the season post All-Star break, and
still almost
post-All-Star
carried him.
break, they were a 50
Yeah.
win pace post All-Star break.
Yeah,
that
still
year.
almost carried him into the playoffs based on just that alone.
ragtag bunch still damn near
That-
made the
yeah,
playoffs with what Dirk did.
The OJ getting called out in game 82 or whatever we were talking about.
Bad guard play is an 82-game hangover. It is the effing worst.
Yep.
And to this day, one of my favorite Maverick memories is the Chicago Saturday afternoon game.
Yes.
Yeah.
With full bearded Dirk, just showing everybody what's up.
That was an awesome win.
That
was a
fourth quarter
fantastic
was
win,
insane.
man.
and then Nate Robinson doing whatever the hell he
He's
wanted
so
to
Nate
do.
Robinson.
He's so Nate Robinson. When we win at home, I'll do the interview back in the locker room, and the game ends. And I start walking down the tunnel and going back, and you see people. That game was like a playoff win because we were walking down the tunnel, walking through the hall, and people are yelling, and you're high-fiving security guards, and everyone's farting. It's like that was like
What does that have to do with?
I don't know, but that's like a
kind of unpleasant in a tunnel setting for all that to be happening.
Everyone's happy and comfortable, I think, is really what it is.
That's our. Go ahead, do it.
But the whole thing is like I remember, kind of jogging. I don't even have to. It's not like we're going to it now. I mean, it's just like I'm charged up, and I remember just kind of half jogging, down that corridor, and everyone's high-fiving, and it felt like a playoff win, and it was a Saturday afternoon in March or whenever
We
that
just
was.
needed Dirk to be Dirk, and
And he
it was
was.
like, damn it,
Yeah.
Dirk is Dirk. Everybody get off my jock. Dirk just did that.
Yep.
It was great.
It was a great feeling for a win late in a season that was a shitburger otherwise. So.
Yeah. And then for him to show what he showed last year, and it's amazing how we just we do these shows, and I mean we take him for granted so much, and how little we talk about Dirk, but the guy is still. I mean, he was 21.7 points a game last year. I mean, one of the best seasons for a 35-plus-year-old ever. I think there's only 4 or 5 guys that averaged over 21 points a game as a 35-plus-year-old. And it's like Jordan, Kareem, Alex English, Karl Malone, and now Dirk.
And this season's going to be a season where he's going to hit some incredible milestones and some incredible names he's going to pass.
I mean, that's all going to happen. I mean, that all should be taken care of by the mathematical midway point of the season easily. I wrote it down last week, and I mean, it's 100 and something points, I think, maybe like 190 to go past Olajuwon. And then he's only about
It's just unbelievable to think.
Yeah, he's only about 400 or 500 away, and then he'll go past. I mean, they're real close together when he'll go past. Elvin Hayes and Moses Malone? Those are 2 guys that he'll pass to go to 8 and then to 7.
Just monsters.
And then Shaq's at 6, but he won't catch him this year.
No.
You have to have you'd have to have like a 2000. You have to have like what he was doing back in 2004 time frame, 2005, 2006 time frame.
And that's not the way this team is built.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so,
And
but
you don't
Shaq
you
is
don't
at
want him
6.
carrying that kind of load anyway. If he does, then something went wrong.
Yep.
I'd like to go on record with this. Olajuwon, greatest Nigerian-born player in NBA history.
I think that's good.
Probably get on
You
board
can-
with you there.
And I think I'm the first to say this on record. So I mean, we've got this podcast to back me up. But I do
But
believe
you know
that.
what? Making a charge on the outside. Well, but see, I shouldn't say that because he's not Nigerian-born, but he does play for the Nigerian national team and played in the 2012 Olympics. Alfaru Aminu.
He's right. Yeah, he's right.
He's
He's
snipping. He's knocking on the
Charging
door.
hard.
He's knocking on the
He's
door.
nipping at the heels. Another thing about going into the season and the feeling and the optimism and all this is there's going to be among guys like us have talked it over a million times, but there's a whole other class of fans of the team that October 30th starting lineups, Tyson Chandler
Yeah.
in the starting lineup there. It's going to be a catharsis for a bunch of people, and right or wrong on how it went from point A to point B here and got us where we are. He's here. People love him.
Yes.
There's a whole.
It's time to move on.
It's time to move.
There's never been any way to jump into a time machine or an alternate universe machine and seeing how things would have turned out differently. There's no point in rehashing it. There were, reasons for the decision. Some people agreed. Some people, nobody ever wanted it to be that way. It wasn't the optimal scenario. It was, dealing with the situation that you had. Some people agreed. Some people will never agree. But it's in the past. There's no way to know how it would have changed any differently. And he's here, and off we go, man.
It's just going to be a joyous thing. As soon as we reacquired the guy, circled that on my calendar. as that's going to be an awesome moment no matter what happens after.
He's a leader of men,
yeah,
too,
he gets
to
his
quote,
due
yeah.
from the fans here, to get to cheer for him in their uniform.
We're going to have a really good it's going to be on Fox Sports Southwest probably next week sometime. I don't know an exact time or date as of yet. It's still in, as we like to say in television skin, post-production.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's still in post-production right now. But there's going to be a great another one of those one-on-one with the Mavericks series. And one is going to be split between profiling Chandler Parsons and Jameer Nelson. And then one will be just a 30-minute profile on Tyson Chandler. And did the interview for it the day of that big press conference at American Airlines Center. And, man, it just fires me up to talk to the guy. He's just you listen to what he's selling and you buy in.
He's the non-phony Ray Lewis without a previous murder allegation or whatever that is. No, he does. He gets you absolutely fired up. What an awesome dude.
Yep.
We're what? What's today, Rylan?
October 13th, so we're 17
We're
days.
17 days from that day and 15 days. I mean,
just
if we
2
keep
weeks.
this podcast going for another hour and a half, it's going to be the 14th, so we'll be 2 weeks from the
let's
day
just
till the
hold
start
out.
of the season.
Did we break all the broadband? What happened?
Yeah.
Or was it bandwidth?
What happened to our sponsors that we didn't step aside for commercial breaks?
No,
tonight?
we
What happened
just
to that?
Sometimes
we're in a groove.
That's the beauty of doing a podcast is there's no rules.
Yeah.
You just
Other
do whatever.
than don't call out management.
Other than don't call out
we
management.
have learned that
Yeah.
that is a rule of a podcast is don't dare management to punish you.
And the management
they will.
in this case is the editor-in-chief.
The rules for a podcast are don't call anybody a liar and don't dare management to do something.
That's how I make this work from 4 years into this thing. I'm like, Brian says, Rylan, what do you think about this? I'm like, what do you think?
Yeah,
Works
there
every
you go.
time.
Whatever, man.
I think whatever you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a good yes man. I like that.
I think it's time to go.
Okay, sounds good.
Mark, Skin,
Enjoyed it.
We love having you on board anytime you're able to come on board.
Well, we always love coming over to Casa de
Yes.
Yep.
We love that. Great job, Grooves. Great job, Shoopy. Yes. Yes.
And he
You're
throws
the best audio engineer that I've worked with twice today.
rolls
Yeah.
Twice in one day.
Twice in one day.
Twice
yes.
in one day.
Shoopy can attest to. He's seen elements of post-production, what we like to call in television skin
Yeah,
post-production.
it's that's what we talk about.
He's
It's
really
seen
complicated
elements
stuff.
of that Tyson Chandler thing, so he knows it's going to be good.
Look how happy he is when you
Yeah.
brought it up. He's
Yep.
smiling.
Well, I
over
want to
there.
see if any more 49er receivers are going to tight ends specifically, since it was Vernon Davis and Vance McDonald. I want to see if any more 49er tight ends are going to run into each other when they both try to catch.
That
a
was
pass here.
kind of the highlight of my
kinda
day.
awesome.
It was pretty great. Too bad it wasn't during Skin's very well and thorough story about his dad.
Yeah.
Because
man,
that would have been
so
such a
pissed.
that would have been such a waste of a great story.
I was like,
would've
man,
been.
fuck Kaepernick.
All right, so we'll be back in a couple weeks to get ready for the season. We'll have some games under our belt, and
I'm going to so many games these first 2 months because I've blocked off January and February because I'm going to have a newborn to deal with. So I've pushed all the games into November and December.
Good for you, man.
So we're going to do a
on,
lot.
on both fronts. Good
Thank
for
you,
you.
sir.
I didn't realize that blessed moment was
it's
coming down the pipe.
It's
for
blessed
you, so.
for sure.
Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
No, congratulations.
she's going to be
Wait a minute.
born into the Church of Russell Westbrook.
yeah,
apparently.
as
So,
we all are.
You totally had sex in March.
Yeah, I did. I really did.
Wow.
Like maybe even more than once.
All right.
It was after the Oklahoma City win when Calderon hit the three to tie the game. It's like all of a sudden,
yeah,
baby,
we
come
just
on.
ran into the bedroom and got some shit done. So lots of games to go to.
Yes.
So going to be lots of analysis. We have to find time on the calendar to get episode 91 and 92 in sometime before Thanksgiving.
We'll do something fun for 100 whenever it gets there.
We've been talking about that for like a year, but
Yeah.
we'll get it done.
Well, I hope we get to be part of that whenever it rolls around.
We'll try to make that
We'll
happen.
make
Blessed
happen.
event that will be.
So until then, we will see you guys later.
Can't wait.